Tell him not to come back. We don't need his kind here, tainting our legacy." Malik Vance stood, rain-soaked, on the ancient cobblestones of the Vance estate, the heavy oak door slamming shut, echoing the finality of a verdict. Inches from his face, the opulent mansion now a fortress. Behind it, he could still hear Mev Vance's voice, sharp, cold, dripping with inherited disdain. "Tell him not to come back. We don't need charity cases ruining our dinner." Moments earlier, the words had sliced through the grand dining hall. He had been humiliated in front of 30 guests, mocked for a bottle of wine deemed unfit, escorted out like a trespasser, not a man who loved their daughter. As Malik stared at the glowing windows, something shifted in his eyes. Pain, yes, but layered with a steel resolve, a fire long banked, now roaring to life. A secret he had carried alone for months. They saw a beggar, a project, a nobody. But they had no idea that the quiet man they tossed into the rain was sitting on a legacy worth $26 million. No idea how quickly the world they built on fragile privilege would crumble. Before this night was over, everything would change. The next morning, Malik sat alone in his small kitchen. The faint hum of the refrigerator filled the silence as sunlight, hesitant and pale, crept through the blinds. His hands were still cold from the night before. The memory of being shoved out of the Vance mansion replayed in fragments. Mev's wrinkled lip, a sneer of pure disgust. Richard's dismissive wave, as if swatting away an insect. The way Lena stood frozen beside them, eyes lowered, a silent accomplice. Malik had heard people talk about humiliation before, but last night he felt it raw, intimate, curling like a blade beneath the ribs. They hadn't touched him physically, but their words had bruised deeper than any fist. He held a mug of coffee, though he barely tasted it. His thoughts drifted, swirling in the steam. For 2 years, he'd tried to convince himself their disdain didn't matter. They were the Vances, old money, old power, steeped in generations of status and entitlement, their wealth built on foundations he couldn't fathom. He was a technician, a man who worked with his hands, who fixed what was broken. He didn't need their approval. He had Lena, or he thought he did. He tried to convince himself again that she hadn't meant to hurt him, that her silence wasn't betrayal, just fear. But denial couldn't soften the truth that burned in the back of his mind. She hadn't spoken a single word in his defense, not one. He placed the mug down carefully, as though any sudden movement might shatter more than ceramic. Malik had never wanted to be part of the Vance world in the first place. Their estate felt like a museum. Silent marble halls, grand chandeliers, portraits of stern-faced ancestors glaring down from gilded frames, faces that had overseen generations of injustice. The house smelled of polished brass and expensive perfume, a sharp contrast to the warmth of Malik's childhood home, a simple apartment where his mother hummed while cooking, where laughter filled every corner, a sanctuary of resilience. He remembered the first time he met Richard and Mev. It was a dinner at a 5-star restaurant, the kind Malik had never stepped foot in before. Richard looked him over like a man appraising a used car. Mev only asked him one question the entire night. "What do you earn yearly?" The answer had ended the conversation. Lena had squeezed his hand under the table, whispering, "Don't mind them. They're like this with everyone." But over time, Malik learned that wasn't true. They weren't like this with everyone. They were like this with him, only him. Because he wasn't born into their world. Because he didn't come with prestige attached to his name. Because he didn't have a father in politics or a mother in philanthropy. Because to them, he was a man of no value. A stark reminder of the world they sought to keep out. The irony nearly made him laugh. He, the man who secretly held wealth so vast it could buy their entire neighborhood 3 times over, was the one they mocked. His phone buzzed. A text from Lena. "We need to talk." No apology, no explanation, just a simple demand. Malik stared at the screen, the cold knot in his stomach tightening. He typed a reply, "When," but paused before sending it. Did he owe her an answer? Did he owe anything to someone who watched him get thrown out like trash? He deleted the message instead. He walked to the small window above the sink, across the street. A bus stopped to pick up school children. Parents waved. Kids laughed. Normal life. Peaceful. He wondered how long it had Then since he felt that kind of uncomplicated happiness, or if he even remembered what it felt like, his life with Lena had become an endless balancing act, twisting himself into knots to fit into a family that despised him, working overtime to make up for the expenses they pressured him into, playing the role of the quiet and harmless husband who never pushed back. He had thought love would be enough, that patience, kindness, and consistency would thaw the ice in their eyes. Instead, the colder he stayed, the more they pushed. Malik grabbed his jacket and stepped outside. Letting the crisp morning air cut through his thoughts, he walked without destination, only needing to move, to feel the ground beneath his feet. His mind drifted to the curse and blessing he carried, the inheritance. He remembered sitting in the lawyer's office 2 months after his mother passed away. He had gone in expecting paperwork, maybe a small amount of savings she'd put aside for emergencies. Instead, the lawyer slid a sealed envelope across the desk with a softness that felt heavy with untold stories. Inside was a letter from his mother, her handwriting elegant, careful, full of love and of fierce, quiet strength. It told him everything. She revealed the truth about his father, a wealthy businessman, a visionary, who had wanted to provide for Malik, but couldn't be part of his life publicly due to threats, political machinations, and the systemic racism of their time, and the intricate web of systemic barriers she refused to acknowledge. His father, a visionary who understood the game, had established a trust for Kai at birth. When he passed, the funds lay dormant, a sleeping giant, until Kai's 30th year, $26 million. Not a fable, not a fleeting dream, not a whispered tale. A stark, undeniable reality. His reality. The lawyer's gaze had been a cocktail of awe and a strange, knowing pity. As if sensing the tectonic shift beneath Kai's calm exterior, he remembered sitting there, numb as the sheer weight of the number pressed down. No thrill, no surge of joy, only one raw, primal emotion, fear. Fear of how such wealth could distort perception, how it could unravel the delicate threads of human connection, expose hidden ugliness, or turn genuine affection into cold strategy. He had promised his mother, looking into her eyes that held the wisdom of generations, that he would never let money dictate the man he became. So he kept it a secret, first from his closest friends, then from Srafina, then, almost, from himself, refusing to touch it, to spend it, even to truly acknowledge its existence. Perhaps it was noble, perhaps naive, but it was a vow he had meant to uphold. He walked until he reached the community garden, a vibrant testament to resilience. Near their apartment, an elder couple tended to their plot. A young activist jogged by. Life, in its relentless rhythm, continued for everyone else. Kai sank onto a weathered bench and watched the world, a kaleidoscope of struggle and hope, move around him. Why had he remained silent last night? Why had he allowed them to diminish him, to erase his dignity? A painful truth, sharp as broken glass, whispered within, because he had loved Srafina enough to believe she would, one day, truly see his worth, even without the shield of wealth, because he had clung to the belief that being a good man, a man of integrity, was enough. But last night had shattered that illusion. Unbounded kindness, he realized, only taught those who lacked empathy how to wound you deeper. He heard footsteps behind him, soft, hesitant. He didn't need to turn. Srafina sat beside him, hands clasped, eyes fixed on the cracked pavement. Her voice, when it came, was a fragile tremor. Kai, about last night he said nothing. She inhaled, a shaky breath. My parents. They went too far. I asked them to apologize. They shouldn't have humiliated you like that. He turned to her, his gaze unwavering. And you, should you have? Her lips parted, but no words emerged, only silence. The same deafening silence she had offered him last night. The kind of silence that cuts to the bone. Before she could attempt another hollow explanation, her phone vibrated. She glanced at the screen, and a fleeting shadow crossed her face, panic. Guilt, something slick and evasive. She angled the phone away, but Kai's eyes, now sharpened by a cold clarity, caught a glimpse. A message from her father. Did you secure the transfer of the deed? Kai's breath hitched, a shard of ice in his lungs. He didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, he leaned back, letting the chilling truth settle like ash. The Sterling family didn't just disdain him. They had a meticulously crafted plan for him, and for the first time in a long time, Kai felt something far more potent than pain ignite within his chest, an unyielding resolve. They saw a man to be dismissed, a pawn to be exploited, but soon they would learn the true measure of the spirit they had so grievously underestimated. Kai didn't mention the message he saw. He simply sat there on the bench, his breath sharp and shallow, as Serafina tucked her phone into her purse, her hands trembling just a little too much. He watched her, not with anger, not yet, but with a dawning clarity that tasted bitter and metallic on his tongue. For 2 years, he had poured his soul into building a marriage, brick by brick, with patience and hope, with small gestures and quiet faith. But now, he saw the insidious patterns beneath the surface, the excuses he had accepted, the silences he had mistaken for peace. Serafina shifted uncomfortably under his unwavering gaze. "Kai, aren't you going to say anything?" He looked at her, truly looked, the way her eyes darted to the ground, the way her shoulders curled inward, as if bracing herself against an inevitable storm. But he didn't explode. That wasn't his way. Instead, he let the truth settle like sediment in his chest. "I don't know what to say," he replied, his voice a calm, dangerous current. "Or what you expect me to say," she frowned, as if his composure unnerved her more than any outburst ever could. "Look," she whispered, her voice strained, "my parents were stressed. The dinner was important. I just didn't want to make a scene. A scene, that was her concern. Not him, standing exposed to their venom. Not him, humiliated in front of strangers. Not the raw, unmasked pain in his eyes that he no longer bothered to hide." He breathed slowly, fighting the tremor in his jaw. "You didn't need to make a scene," he said quietly, his words cutting through the air. "You just needed to stand beside me." Her face crumpled for a fleeting moment, a mask slipping, before she straightened. "You're being unfair. You know how my parents are. And you let them," he answered. Silence again, heavy, suffocating. She stood abruptly. "I think we should talk later, when we've both calmed down." Calmed down, as if he were the one who had lost control. He watched her walk away, her heels clicking sharply on the concrete path, each sound a metronome marking the unraveling of something that had been fraying for far too long. By the time Kai returned home, he felt like he had aged a decade. The message he saw flashed again in his mind. "Did you secure the transfer of the deed?" His stomach twisted into a knot of ice. The deed? What deed? Why did her father need him to sign anything? And why was Serafina involved? Inside the apartment, he froze. The living room was immaculate. Too immaculate. Cushions aligned perfectly, not a single item out of place. And then he noticed. The drawer near the TV stand was slightly ajar, the one where he kept his most important documents. He crossed the room slowly, his heart pounding, and pulled it open. The heavy, embossed envelope where he stored the deed to his childhood home, the only property, the only tangible link to his heritage he owned before marrying Serafina. It was gone. The deed, it wasn't just a piece of paper, it was the last tangible whisper of his mother, the very foundation of his heritage. The modest home, a sanctuary where she had nurtured him before illness stole her away. Now, it was gone. Caleb fought the rising tide of dread, a cold, suffocating wave threatening to pull him under. He gripped the worn fabric of the couch, his mind a whirlwind. The Sterling family's disdain, once dismissed as mere snobbery, now felt like a meticulously crafted weapon. Had he always been their target? Was Serafina, his wife, a pawn in their cruel game from the very beginning? No, he wouldn't believe it, but the doubt, a venomous serpent, began to unravel every cherished memory, thread by agonizing thread. He replayed moments he'd once rationalized, now seen through a chilling, new lens. Victor Sterling's patronizing offer to manage his finances, because men like you need guidance. Eleanor Sterling's insistence on linking their accounts for emergencies. Serafina's sudden, relentless pressure to sell his childhood home, to start fresh. The heated arguments, his steadfast refusal. Her tears afterward, the 2 days of icy silence. Then, he'd seen them as marital squabbles. Now, they were puzzle pieces. snapping into a mosaic of betrayal, a masterpiece of manipulation darker than his deepest fears. He leaned back, a guttural exhale tearing through gritted teeth. The apartment walls, once comforting, now pressed in, to close, to silent. His phone buzzed. A jarring intrusion. Victor Sterling. Caleb stared at the screen, a silent battle raging within. He didn't answer. The call went to voicemail, a hollow echo in the quiet room. A message followed, a digital dagger. We need to discuss the deed. Serafina is confused and upset. Call me back. Confused and upset. The familiar tactic. Make him responsible. Make him doubt. Pull him back into their toxic orbit. Not this time. Caleb placed the phone face down. The tight coil of dread in his stomach slowly, agonizingly, unfurled. But it wasn't despair that replaced it. It was something sharper, steadier. Awareness, resolve. He could no longer ignore the truth. The Sterling family wasn't just cruel. They were strategic. Every insult, every subtle manipulation, every degrading remark wasn't random. They were calculated steps in a meticulous plan to dismantle his independence, his spirit, piece by agonizing piece. And Serafina. He closed his eyes, a phantom ache in his chest. He remembered their early days, laughter echoing in a cramped cafe, dancing in their tiny apartment, whispering dreams under the soft glow of lamplight. She wasn't cruel then. She wasn't calculating. She was warm, open, gentle. Where had that woman gone? He wanted to believe she was merely caught in her parents' shadow. But the missing deed, Victor Sterling's message, the coldness that had replaced the warmth in her eyes months ago, they painted a different truth. A truth he wasn't ready to face, but one he could no longer avoid. He stood, walking to the bedroom. Her perfume still lingered. A floral scent he once adored, now a nauseating reminder. He opened the closet, his eyes narrowing. Half her clothes were gone. Not stolen, not misplaced. Gone, taken deliberately. She was leaving him. A cold, hard understanding settled into his bones. She wasn't planning to talk. She wasn't planning to fix anything. She was planning to take everything she and her parents could pry from his hands. The floor felt unsteady beneath him. For a moment, he swayed, bracing himself against the doorframe, eyes squeezed shut against the crushing weight. But then, slowly, his breathing evened out, his heartbeat steadied. A quiet, unyielding strength slid into place, a strength he didn't recognize at first, but soon embraced. They thought he was weak. They thought he was predictable. They thought he had nothing. They didn't know about the 26 million. They didn't know about the trust documents, locked away in a safety deposit box. They didn't know the law could protect him more powerfully than they could manipulate him. He straightened, shoulders squaring. The small apartment no longer felt suffocating. It felt like the starting point of something else. Something bigger, stronger, necessary. He would not be prey. Caleb picked up his phone. Not to call Victor Sterling, but to make a different call. A call he should have made years ago. Hello, came a calm, professional voice. I'd like to schedule an appointment, Caleb said, his voice steady, resolute. For what matter? He glanced at the empty drawer, the ghost of humiliation still clinging to him from last night. For everything, he answered. And for the first time in his life, Caleb felt the ground shift, not beneath him, but beneath them. The law office Caleb visited 2 days later was a stark contrast to the gleaming, intimidating towers of the Sterling Empire. This office was nestled between a bustling bakery and a quiet pharmacy, its glass door rattling gently as he pushed it open. Inside, warm lamplight spilled across shelves of well-worn books. The air smelled faintly of aged paper and cedar. It felt safe. That alone was enough to loosen the vice grip around his chest. The receptionist directed him to a small, unassuming conference room. He waited only a moment before a woman entered, tall, composed, with eyes that held the wisdom of countless battles fought and won. She introduced herself as Justice Albright, a lawyer renowned not for wealth or connections, but for her unwavering commitment to dismantling manipulative power structures. Piece by piece, she shook Caleb's hand firmly, her grip a silent promise. Tell me everything, she said, settling into her chair, her gaze unwavering. It took him a moment to gather the words. Then the story poured out, slowly at first, Then with an unstoppable torrent of emotion, he spoke of the humiliation, the relentless, disguised barbs, the missing deed, Serafina's chilling transformation. He even mentioned the secret inheritance, a truth he hadn't dared to utter aloud to anyone until now. As he spoke, the weight lifted, replaced by a burgeoning sense of purpose. This wasn't just about him. This was about reclaiming dignity, about fighting for the truth against a system designed to crush the spirit of the underdog. Since his mother's passing, Kai had poured out his heart to Aunt Vivian, a torrent of confusion and grief. She listened, a silent anchor in his storm. When he finally fell quiet, she leaned back, fingers steepled beneath her chin, her gaze piercing. "They're trying to set you up, Kai," she stated, blunt as a hammer blow. "Senator Thornton and his family. They want to corner you legally, financially. They want the legacy house. The missing deed confirms it." Kai swallowed, the confirmation a bitter pill, sharper than any suspicion. "But why?" he whispered, his voice raw. "I don't understand. I have nothing they'd want." Aunt Vivian held his gaze, a long, measured look that spoke of generations of wisdom. "People like the Thorntons," she began, her voice low, "never assume someone has nothing. They assume there's always something to take: power, property, control, and you." Her voice softened, a touch of sorrow in it. "You seem like someone who is easy to underestimate." Kai flinched, not because she was wrong, but because she was devastatingly right. He had allowed it. For love, for peace, for Serafina. He had extended grace, offered second chances, again and again, and they had mistaken it for weakness. Aunt Vivian reached for a worn notepad, her movements deliberate. "You need protection, Kai. Immediate. First, we document the disappearance of your legacy house deed. Then we secure your finances, especially your mother's inheritance. After that, we begin building a legal defense, because they will attempt to build a narrative against you." Kai blinked. "A narrative?" She nodded. "Men like Senator Thornton rarely rely on truth. They craft stories, ones that benefit them, ones that paint you as unstable, incompetent, unfit. They'll twist your quiet strength into something it isn't." A cold dread settled in Kai's stomach. "They've already started, haven't they?" "I'd bet the Freedom Heights district on it," Aunt Vivian affirmed, her eyes flinty. Kai stared at the polished oak table, the wood grain blurring into a swirling vortex. His fingers curled into fists, knuckles cracking softly. He had always believed in kindness, in giving the benefit of the doubt, in seeing the best intentions even where none existed. It was how his mother had raised him: lead with empathy. "My boy," her voice echoed in his memory. "Even the coldest heart can thaw." But his mother had never taught him how to fight those who refused to thaw, those who thrived on dominance, on coercion, those who looked at him and saw only prey. Aunt Vivian began outlining steps, her voice a steady rhythm against the rising tide of Kai's despair. Kai took notes mechanically, his mind racing. With every word she spoke, the pattern of the past 2 years snapped into chilling focus. Serafina's sudden shift after their wedding, Senator Thornton's relentless pressure about joint finances, Eleanor's frequent, insidious suggestions that Kai couldn't possibly manage the legacy house alone, the insistence on selling his childhood home, the way they had encouraged Serafina to monitor his spending, the way she had started parroting their lines like insidious vines. The Thorntons had wrapped themselves around him, slowly, imperceptibly, tightening their grip until the pressure made it impossible to breathe. "Kai," Aunt Vivian said suddenly, her voice cutting through the fog of his thoughts, "you need to understand something crucial. Their behavior isn't accidental, it's patterned, it's strategic." He nodded, his jaw tight. He knew that now. Every cold glance, every cutting remark, every seemingly casual slight, it hadn't been random cruelty, it had been preparation. He forced himself to breathe deeply, the air burning in his lungs. "What do I do now?" "You fight back," she said, simply, carefully, quietly, but with an unshakable resolve that resonated deep within him. When Kai left Aunt Vivian's office, the rain had begun to fall again, a gentle, rhythmic washing over the historic streets of Freedom Heights. He walked without an umbrella, letting the cool droplets touch his skin. For the first time in months, maybe years, he felt present in his own body. But clarity came with its own kind of pain. His mother's letter weighed heavily in his memory, her elegant handwriting flickering in his mind. The words, tender and final, "Don't let money change the man you are. Let it free you, not own you." He closed his eyes briefly. He had honored her wish, perhaps too well. He had hidden his wealth, suppressed it, treated it like a curse rather than a tool. But now hiding it might be the very thing that destroyed him. A single question formed, solid and unavoidable. Was protecting the secret worth sacrificing himself? He didn't know the answer yet, but he knew something else with absolute certainty. He would not be blindsided again. Later that evening, Kai returned to the legacy house to find Serafina waiting for him in the living room. She stood when he walked in, wringing her hands, her eyes red-rimmed, whether from crying or guilt. He couldn't tell. "Where have you been?" she asked, her voice thin. He hung his jacket calmly out. "Does it matter with whom?" She swallowed hard, her voice quivering. "Kai, we need to talk about the house." He paused mid-step. There it was. He turned slowly, his expression unreadable. "What about it?" Well, she hesitated, searching his face. "My parents think it would be best for us to sell it and invest in a new property, something bigger, something more suitable for our future family." "Our future family," Kai repeated softly, a chilling edge to his voice. "Funny, because last week you said you weren't ready for kids." Her face flushed crimson. I've been thinking." "No," he interrupted, his voice steady, cold as ice. "You've been coached." She flinched, her eyes widening in shock. "That's not fair." "Neither is stealing my legacy house deed," he countered, his gaze unwavering. Her body went still, pale. He saw the truth flash in her eyes, not confusion, not denial, but stark, undeniable recognition. I wanted us to have stability. My parents." He stopped at the doorway, his silhouette a stark challenge against the fading light. "That's the problem, Serafina. Your parents dictate, and you merely echo. I no longer know where you end, and their will begins." Her tears spilled, a silent river, but his resolve was iron. "Not this time. Not after everything." "Kai," she whispered, her voice a fragile plea. "I love you. I do." He studied her, a long, piercing gaze, her trembling chin, her glistening eyes, the desperation twisting her features. "You love the convenient fiction they crafted," he said, his voice a low, steady current. "Not the man standing before you, stripped bare." She gasped, covering her mouth, but he continued, his words like stones dropping into a deep well. "I gave you every chance to choose me, to stand by me, and every time you chose them." She reached for him, but he stepped back. For the first time, she looked fragile, broken. And he, solid as granite. He wasn't angry. He wasn't shouting. He was simply done. "I'm meeting with my lawyer again tomorrow," he stated. "Whatever plans your parents have, whatever narrative they're building, it ends now." Her breathing hitched. "Lawyer?" He nodded once. Yes, a single word escaped her. A desperate whisper, "Please." But Kai turned away, the decision already carved into his bones. Behind him, he heard her whisper something faint, almost lost beneath her sob. "I never wanted to hurt you." He paused in the hallway, a fleeting moment. He closed his eyes. He almost believed her. Almost. But almost wasn't enough anymore. Not after the stolen deed. Not after the voicemails. Not after the years of calculated silence. He walked forward without looking back. The man who let himself be humiliated was gone. A titan was rising in his place. The day after confronting Serafina, Kai found himself standing outside the Blackwood estate again. Not as a guest, not as a son-in-law, but as an outsider, a warrior surveying the fortress of his oppressors, the polished exterior, towering pillars, and perfectly trimmed hedges. They looked almost theatrical now, a stage where he had unknowingly played the role of the pawn they believed they could sacrifice, a role they had cast him into, not one he ever chose. He wasn't here to go inside, not yet. He simply stood at the gate, gripping the cold iron bars, letting the memory of their contempt wash through him, not to weaken him, but to sharpen him. Inside those walls, Richard and Maev Blackwood were likely planning their next move. He pictured them at their long, glossy dining table, wine glasses filled, expressions sour, discussing their disappointment in their daughter's poor choice of husband. And Serafina? Where was she now, hiding, crying, or plotting alongside them? He didn't know anymore. He wasn't sure he wanted to know. A gust of wind rustled through the ancient trees, scattering golden leaves across the driveway. Kai inhaled deeply. A part of him ached with grief, betrayal, disbelief. But beneath it, something steadier, harder, clarity. He walked away from the mansion and headed to his car. Today wasn't about them. Today was about reclaiming his legacy, his very soul. When he arrived at Alia Reed's office, she already had papers laid out neatly across the table, reports, preliminary filings, case notes. She looked up and nodded as he entered. "You're right on time," she said. "We have a lot to go through." He took a seat, noticing the new document on top, stolen property report. "I've filed the initial report with the county," she said. "It establishes an irrefutable paper trail that your property deed was taken without consent." "Good," he murmured, though the word felt too small for the weight it carried. "And there's more," she added, sliding another folder toward him. "I had one of my investigators look into the Blackwood family's legal activity. Over the past few months," Kai stiffened. "What did you find?" She opened the folder. "They've been consulting with a law firm, one that specializes in the dark arts of asset transfers and marital disputes." The room felt suddenly colder. He steeled himself. "So it's true. They plan something." "They've been building a case," Alia confirmed, "based on the notes my investigator retrieved. It appears they were preparing to challenge your financial stability. They plan to establish you as an unfit provider for their daughter, which could give them leverage in pushing a forced sale of shared assets." "My childhood home," Kai whispered. Yes, a tightness gripped his throat. That house was more than a building. It was the sacred ground of his lineage, where he learned to ride a bike, where his mother read him bedtime stories, where she danced with him in the kitchen on rainy days. Losing it wasn't an inconvenience. It was losing a piece of his soul. Alia continued, her voice steady and precise. "And that's not all. They may also have been trying to preemptively shape a narrative, to weave a web of lies, to rewrite his truth, to influence future divorce proceedings." He froze. "They were planning the divorce?" She nodded grimly. With or without Serafina's input. His stomach twisted. He wasn't naive. He knew his marriage was strained. But to know they had mapped out a plan to discard him, like he was nothing more than a temporary inconvenience. This cut deeper than all the snide remarks combined. "Why?" His voice cracked, almost imperceptibly. "What hunger drives such malice?" "Control," Alia replied. "Absolute dominion over their daughter, over their tainted legacy, and over you. Because they assumed you were financially powerless." He almost laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "If only they knew." Alia's eyes sharpened. "That's another thing we need to address. Your inheritance." His breath stilled. "I know you want to keep it secret," she said gently. "But secrecy is a vulnerability right now. If they believe you're poor, they will continue targeting you as someone easy to manipulate. They prey on perceived weakness. It's time to show them the true measure of your power. But if necessary, we can use your inheritance as leverage." Enya's voice was a steady anchor. Kairos looked down, jaw clenched. "It's not about the money. It never was." "I know," she said softly, her gaze piercing. "But sometimes a weapon is a weapon, even if you don't want to use it." He swallowed hard, the weight of a promise to his mother pressing down. Never let money change him. But what if he had misunderstood? What if she wasn't telling him to hide it, but to wield it wisely, to fight for what was right? He exhaled slowly, a decision solidifying. "Do whatever you think is best, Anya. I trust you." She nodded once, an alliance forged not in comfort, but in desperate necessity. That evening, Kairos returned to the quiet hum of his apartment. Serafina wasn't there. Another half of her remaining belongings had vanished, leaving behind an emptiness that resonated not just in the space, but deep within his soul. He walked through the silent rooms, each step a hollow echo. His fingers traced the worn fabric of the sofa where she used to curl up, a blanket draped around her. He brushed the cool surface of the kitchen counter, a ghost of shared laughter and meals lingering there. The absence stung, a sharp, bitter ache. But with it came a brutal clarity. She wasn't fighting for him. She wasn't choosing them. She was choosing comfort, choosing control, choosing the gilded cage of her parents' approval. He sank into a kitchen chair, head in his hands, the world blurring. For a moment, raw, helpless grief threatened to consume him. How could love, once so pure, morph into something so unrecognizable, so tainted by manipulation? But then the memories flashed, the chilling message, the stolen deed, the public humiliation, her deafening silence when he needed her most. The grief didn't vanish. It hardened. It forged into something cold, unyielding. He lifted his head, eyes burning with a new resolve. He wasn't the same man who had shivered in the rain outside Thorn Manor, a broken plea on his lips. He wasn't the man who swallowed insults, who bent his knee to keep a false peace. He wasn't the man who let others dictate his worth. He was done. 2 days later, Kairos arrived at the imposing gates of Thorn Manor, not to beg, not to apologize, but to reclaim his very dignity. A formal dinner party was in full swing. Luxury cars gleamed along the circular drive. Laughter and classical music spilled from the grand entrance, a symphony of privilege. Guests, adorned in glittering finery, mingled beneath the chandeliers. Kairos approached the massive oak doors, his stride calm, his purpose absolute. The same hulking security guard from before blocked his path. Senator Thorne said, "You're not permitted, sir." Kairos reached into his coat, pulling out a crisp document. A legal notice. The guard hesitated, eyes flicking over the bold, official lettering. Kairos stepped forward, his voice calm, but edged with the cold steel of conviction. "I'm not here for them," he stated, his gaze unwavering. "I'm here for what's mine." Before the guard could react, the heavy door swung open. A sudden hush fell over the nearby conversations. Senator Thorne himself appeared, his expression twisting into a sneer of pure annoyance. "What is he doing here?" Kairos stepped inside, ignoring the sudden murmurs and stares that followed him like shadows. Senator Thorne stormed toward him, jaw clenched, face reddening. "You have no right to be here," he growled, his voice a low threat. "That's where you're wrong," Kairos replied, extending the document. "This is a formal notification. My lawyer has filed a claim for the unauthorized removal of my property deed." And he added, his voice cutting through the silence, "I'm also filing a protective order regarding any further attempts to manipulate my assets." Senator Thorne's face went from red to purple. "How dare you?" "No," Kairos cut in, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "How dare you?" For the first time in 2 years, Senator Thorne fell silent, his bluster deflating. Eleanor Thorne, elegant and predatory, approached, her expression a mask of manufactured concern. "Kairos, dear, surely this is a misunderstanding." "It's not," he replied sharply, his eyes never leaving hers. Guests watched, frozen, whispering, their eyes widening as the tension crackled like static electricity. Then, a gasp. Serafina appeared at the top of the grand staircase. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her breath shallow, ragged. She stared down at him, a complicated storm of emotions swirling across her face: shock, regret, fear. Kairos looked up at her, not with bitterness, but with a profound, liberating truth. "I'm not your victim anymore," he said softly, his voice carrying through the stunned silence. Serafina's lips parted, but no sound escaped. Senator Thorne finally found his voice, a venomous hiss. "You think you can challenge us? You have nothing." A slow, cold smile, utterly devoid of warmth, formed on Kairos's lips. "That's where you're wrong," he said, his voice a low rumble of thunder. "I have more than you ever imagined." And as he walked past Senator Thorne, the very air in the room seemed to shift, to crackle with a new energy. This wasn't the end. This was the beginning, the moment. Kairos Ward stopped apologizing for his existence and started fighting for it. Kairos didn't sleep that night, not because of fear, but because the truth had finally cracked open, spilling out in jagged, undeniable pieces he could no longer ignore. He sat on the edge of his bed, long past midnight, elbows on his knees, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white, staring at the floorboards. Every word Senator Thorne had spat replayed on a relentless loop. "You think you can challenge us? You have nothing." He'd expected the senator to be manipulative, cruel, arrogant. But hearing the man speak those words with such absolute, unshakable confidence, such conviction that Kairos was utterly powerless, had sliced into him in a way he hadn't anticipated. For too long, Kairos had believed it too. That was the most painful, insidious part. Just after dawn, his phone buzzed. A message from Anya. "I need to see you today, urgent." The word urgent dug into his chest like a cold hook. Something had happened. An hour later, he entered Anya's law office, still wrapped in the lingering remnants of anxiety. Though he kept his expression carefully controlled, Anya stood by the window, arms crossed, staring out at the bustling city street as if organizing invisible, complex puzzle pieces in her mind. Without turning, her voice low and grave, she said, "The Thorne family made their move." Kairos's stomach tightened, a cold knot forming. What did they do? She turned to face him, her eyes sharp, unwavering. "They filed an informal petition claiming you might be mentally unstable." He froze. The words hit him like a physical blow, stealing the air from his lungs. "Mentally unstable. That petition," she continued, her voice grim, "is designed to justify further legal action, like forcing a competency evaluation, challenging your control over your assets. It's a classic power play. Or claiming you're unfit to lead, unfit to manage the community's future. It's not official yet, but they've begun gathering statements." Kai pressed a hand against the cold steel of the chair, steadying himself. Statements from who? Anya hesitated. Neighbors, colleagues, and from Srafina. Kai's breath hitched, a sharp, painful intake. "Srafina? She agreed to this?" Anya clarified, her voice gentle but firm. "Not formally. But she's been giving small statements to the Caldwell Estates legal team. Enough to suggest she's willing." Kai felt his chest collapse inward, a hollow ache spreading. He sank slowly into the chair, as if the weight of the world had doubled. He had feared betrayal, had felt its shadow creeping, but hearing it confirmed. He wasn't prepared for that kind of visceral pain. Anya continued, her voice a lifeline in the storm. "It's clear the Caldwell estate wants to build a profile that paints you as unreliable, unstable. They're aiming for full control, to seize the ancestral grove, to manipulate the land rights, to erase your family's legacy. Either way, Kai, they're escalating. This is a full-scale assault." Kai rubbed his temples, trying to steady his breathing, to quell the tremor in his hands. He spoke after a long moment, his voice strained, but hardening with resolve. "What do we do now?" "We strengthen your defense," Anya declared, her eyes burning with conviction. "And we gather our own evidence." Kai lifted his head, a spark igniting in his gaze. "Evidence of what?" Anya slid a thick folder across the table. "Evidence of their manipulation, their coercion, their pattern of systemic exploitation. Everything they've done to you, to your family, to your community, and everything they've tried to take." Inside were printed photos, screenshots of damning text messages, meticulous notes from investigators, copies of legal inquiries filed by Mr. Caldwell months earlier. Anya flipped through pages, her voice a steady drumbeat of truth. "These messages show Srafina diverting funds from the community project accounts. Without your consent, these financial inquiries show Mr. Caldwell was trying to access and undermine your credit, your standing. And these recordings," she tapped a USB drive, "contain conversations we managed to capture. From the dinner where they publicly humiliated you, where they tried to break your spirit." Kai stared at the folder, his throat tightening, a storm brewing within him. Evidence of a reality he'd lived, endured in silence, but never fully documented. Now, the insidious patterns of oppression had been given names. Economic disenfranchisement, institutional gaslighting, cultural erasure. It was overwhelming. A tidal wave of injustice, but it was also profoundly empowering. "We're not just defending you, Kai," Anya said, her voice rising. "We're building a counteroffensive. We're fighting for justice." Kai nodded slowly, his jaw set. "And Srafina?" "We'll address her involvement," Anya replied, her gaze unwavering. "But right now, the priority is protecting you, protecting the grove, protecting your people." He exhaled, a deep, cleansing breath. "What happens next?" "We move forward," Anya stated, carefully, strategically, and with every single piece of documentation. He closed the folder, his fingers steady, no longer trembling. "Okay," he said, his voice low and resonant. "Let's fight." Later that afternoon, Kai returned to the apartment to find Serafina waiting inside. She stood by the window, her profile tense, bathed in the fading light, her hands clasped in front of her like a penitent child. "Where were you?" she asked, her voice thin. "As soon as he entered." "Out," he said simply, his gaze unwavering as he walked past her. "You're avoiding me." He set his keys down on the table, the metallic clink echoing in the silence. "I'm protecting myself." Her breath hitched. "Kai." He turned to face her, his expression unreadable, a mask of quiet strength. She hesitated, then stepped closer. "My parents told me what you did," she said, her voice laced with accusation. "Serving them that notice, making a scene. You embarrassed them." "I defended myself," he replied, his voice calm, unwavering. She swallowed hard. "They're furious." "I am not responsible for their emotions," he countered, his eyes holding hers. "Kai," she whispered, reaching for his arm, her fingers brushing his sleeve. "Why are you doing this? Why are you making everything worse?" He pulled his arm back, the movement deliberate. "Because they stole from me. They didn't steal." "Kai," her voice rose, but is hardened. "The deed to the ancestral grove is missing." Her lips trembled, a flicker of guilt, then fear in her eyes. I thought if we sold it, maybe we could move somewhere better, start fresh." "Better for who?" he asked, his voice cold, cutting through the air. She stepped back, stunned by a tone she had never heard from him before, a chilling clarity. "I wanted us to start fresh," she whispered weakly, "with your parents holding the pen while I sign away my heritage, my community's future." Her voice cracked. "It's not like that. I didn't want to hurt you, but you did," he said quietly, his gaze piercing. Over and over, tears welled up in her eyes. "I'm trying, Kai. I want to fix this." He studied her face, the trembling lips, the trembling hands, the fragile desperation. But beneath it, something vital was missing. "Truth. You're not trying to fix us," he said softly, his voice heavy with sorrowful understanding. "You're trying to fix the situation, so your parents don't lose control." Her tears spilled, a torrent. "That's not true." "It is." He stepped back, creating an unbridgeable chasm between them. "You only came home after they received the legal notice, not after they humiliated me, not after you stayed silent, only after you realized they're not winning." She opened her mouth, but no defense came, only a choked sob. He continued, his voice heavy with quiet sorrow, with the weight of a broken dream. "You didn't come back for me. You came back to keep me manageable." She shook her head violently, sobbing, a desperate, theatrical display. "I love you. I do. I swear I do." But he heard something hollow in her voice, something rehearsed, something desperate. Not for him, but for stability, for the illusion of control. He closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, resolve had settled into his expression like steel, unyielding, unbreakable. "Serafina," he said gently, his voice carrying the weight of finality. "Love doesn't look like fear. It doesn't look like theft. It doesn't look like letting your family destroy your husband's dignity, his legacy, his very identity." She collapsed into a chair, covering her face as deep, wrenching sobs shook her shoulders. Kai watched her, his heart heavy, but no longer confused. For the first time, he saw his marriage clearly, a delicate thing built on affection. Yes, but ultimately drowned by systemic control and complicity. After several moments, she lifted her face, eyes red and pleading. "Can we try again, Kai?" He hesitated, because a part of him, some fragile, aching part, wanted to say yes, to believe her, to believe that the woman he loved, the woman he thought he knew, still existed beneath the damage, beneath the betrayal. But trust was a bridge made of glass, and hers had shattered long before this moment. Instead of answering, he said quietly, his gaze fixed on a distant, brighter future. "I'm meeting Aisha again tomorrow," Kellen said, his voice a low rumble. "You should know that." Serafina's breath hitched, a fragile sound in the vast silence of their opulent living room. "You're leaving me?" "I'm choosing my truth," he replied, perhaps for the first time, the words a heavy, liberating weight. Tears streamed down her cheeks, glistening in the dim light. She whispered something so soft, he almost didn't hear it. Please, don't give up on us. Kellen gazed at her, a long, painful moment stretching between them like a chasm. It's not me who gave up, he said gently, his heart aching. Her face crumpled, but he turned away before he could break. As he walked into the bedroom, a chilling clarity settled over him. This wasn't just a relationship ending. This was a transformation, a shedding of shackles he hadn't realized he wore. He didn't know where the path ahead led, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He would no longer walk it on his knees. The next morning arrived slower than usual, as though time itself hesitated to move forward. Kellen lay awake long before dawn, staring at the faint outline of the ceiling. He could hear the soft, uneven breathing of Serafina sleeping beside him. It should have comforted him once it did, but now it only reminded him how far they had drifted from the truth they once promised each other. He rose quietly, careful not to disturb her, and walked into the living room. The early morning light broke through the blinds in thin, pale stripes. Dust motes danced softly in the air. The world felt muted, like a photograph captured moments before something catastrophic. He made coffee but didn't drink it. His stomach twisted in knots, too tight for appetite. Today wasn't just another step. It was the moment the ground beneath him might shift entirely. At 9 a.m., he sat once again in Aisha's office. She placed a new stack of documents in front of him. Her expression was more serious than before, a heaviness in her eyes. We found something else, she began. Kellen's pulse quickened. What? She slid a sheet toward him. This is an internal memo from the Thorne dynasty's legal counsel. Kellen skimmed the page and felt his blood turn to ice. It wasn't just about their separation. It wasn't just manipulation. It was an outlined strategy to declare him legally incompetent. A strategy to seize control of his ancestral lands, his community's heritage. He scanned the words, each one a venomous dart aimed at his very identity. Evaluate possibility of contesting ancestral land rights due to subject's perceived instability. Frame subject as unable to maintain cultural responsibility. Push for immediate sale of communal assets. Leverage Serafina's statements as reinforcement. Kellen felt a suffocating weight pressing down on his chest. They were planning all this months ago? Aisha nodded. Your in-laws didn't react to anything. They prepared. This was never about your relationship, Kellen. It was about control. And Serafina? He asked softly, dread coiling in his gut. Aisha hesitated. Her statements are minimal, not directly harmful, but she hasn't defended you. He swallowed the bitter truth. Not defending was its own form of betrayal. Aisha continued, but there's more. My investigator found records showing Richard Thorne attempted to access your communities. Financial information. Through unauthorized channels, they suspected you were hiding resources. Kellen frowned sharply. Why? I never gave them any reason. You're independent. You hold your heritage close. That's enough for people like them, she said. He pushed a hand through his hair, overwhelmed. So they assumed I was poor, but also assumed I was hiding something? Exactly, she replied. Arrogant people always assume everyone else is hiding something, just like they are. Kellen exhaled shakily. It all made sense now. Their hostility wasn't just disdain, it was greed. A hunger for something he never offered, something they sensed but couldn't confirm. And here's the worst part, Aisha said, lowering her voice. Your father-in-law has already filed a preliminary petition to the court. It's not official yet, but it's a threat, a message telling you what's coming. Kellen stared at the papers, anger and disbelief twisting in his chest. A petition meant to strip him of his voice. A petition meant to humiliate his people. A petition meant to erase everything he inherited from his ancestors. He slammed the files shut, knuckles white. I won't let them do this, he said quietly. Serafina collapsed into the antique velvet chair, her sobs echoing in the vast loft. I didn't know, Kai, I swear, I didn't know. Kai watched her, a part of him aching with a familiar sorrow, but a larger, unyielding part was weary of convenient ignorance, tired of blind loyalty to systems that crushed others. His voice, though soft, carried the weight of generations. Serafina, your parents, the Blackwoods, they planned to dismantle my very existence. And you've been a pawn in their game, unknowingly aiding them. I didn't mean to, she cried, her voice cracking. I know, he said, his gaze unwavering. But impact, Srafina, always matters more than intention. She covered her face, her shoulders shaking. What are you going to do? He exhaled slowly, the sound like a sigh of ancient stones. I am going to protect my truth. And us, she whispered, her voice a fragile thread, his chest constricted. He wanted to offer comfort, to say yes, to say maybe. But the truth pressed too heavily. Us cannot exist if their control over you dictates your reality, he said quietly. Her sob deepened, a raw, guttural sound. I don't want to lose you. Kai's voice cracked, almost imperceptibly. Then you should have stood beside me, Srafina. When they tried to silence the truth of who I am, she slowly lifted her head, her eyes, once clouded, now shone with a desperate regret. Tell me what I can do. For a moment, he considered the easy path, a hollow forgiveness. But forgiveness without accountability was merely another form of surrender to injustice. Instead, he said, his voice firm, the only thing you can do is stop lying. To me, to yourself, and to them. She nodded weakly, wiping away her tears with trembling hands. He added, and you need to choose which legacy you belong to. The words hung in the air, cold and definitive as a judge's gavel. Kai couldn't bear the oppressive silence of the loft. He stepped outside, walking aimlessly through the vibrant, yet often overlooked, streets of his community. The moon, a silver sentinel, cast long shadows across the pavement. His mind spiraled with questions that had no easy answers. Was their bond salvageable? Was Srafina a victim of her lineage, or a participant in its perpetuation? Was love enough to rebuild trust once shattered by systemic deceit? He didn't know, but he did know he wasn't the same man anymore. The man who endured veiled insults for the sake of peace. The man who swallowed words to avoid conflict. The man who believed patience could thaw even the coldest hearts. That man had been replaced by someone stronger, someone who understood that silence was complicity. As he crossed a bustling intersection, his phone buzzed. A message from Dr. Reese Thorne. We've uncovered something significant. Come in tomorrow morning. His stomach tightened, not with dread, but with a fierce anticipation. Another piece of the monumental puzzle was about to fall into place. But this time, he felt prepared, because the truth wasn't his enemy, it was his weapon. And whatever was coming, Kai would face it standing tall, not as the man the Blackwoods tried to break, but as the man they never expected him to become. The next morning dawned, heavy with the weight of 1,000 unanswered questions pressing down on Kai's chest. He showered, dressed, and left the loft while Srafina was still asleep. He didn't wake her. He didn't leave a note. Their conversations from the last few days echoed too loudly in his mind, broken promises, half-truths, excuses padded with tears. He needed clarity, a truth unclouded by others' narratives, and she couldn't give it to him. Dr. Thorne's private research facility felt colder today. Despite the soft light filtering through the blinds, she motioned for him to sit, her face grave, composed, but brimming with something else, something he didn't recognize yet. I told you we found something significant. She began. Before I show you, I want you to take a breath. He tried, but it came out rigid, caught in his throat. Tell me, Dr. Thorne said gently, this is about your father. Kai froze. The air left his lungs in a sudden gasp. My father, he whispered, his voice barely audible. But he died when I was a baby. That's the story your mother told you. She said softly, and she wasn't lying. But the story was incomplete. Kai felt the world shift beneath him, the solid ground thinning to vapor. What do you mean? Dr. Thorne opened a thick, archival envelope and slid a series of documents toward him. Birth certificates, legal records, a will, trust documents, faded newspaper clippings, all bearing one name. Marcus Vance, a name Kai vaguely recognized from headlines years ago. A titan of industry, a powerful philanthropist, influential, charismatic, a man nearly untouchable in political and financial circles. His father. Kai's vision blurred for a moment. He gripped the arms of the chair, his knuckles white. This has to be a mistake, he said hoarsely. It's not, Dr. Thorne replied gently. We verified everything through state archives and corporate records. Marcus Vance set up a trust fund for a child he never publicly acknowledged, due to reasons documented in sealed letters to your mother." "Sealed letters?" Kai whispered, his throat tight. She nodded and slid another envelope across the table. His mother's name was written in elegant penmanship, Marcus Vance's signature signed beneath it. His hands trembled as he reached for it. "What do the letters say?" "We haven't opened them," she replied. "They're addressed to you." He swallowed hard, breathing unsteady. "Why? Why would my father hide me?" He choked, the pain that surfaced shocking him deep raw. A wound he hadn't known he carried. Dr. Thorne leaned forward. "Kai, Marcus Vance wasn't a cruel man, according to our findings. He was being threatened by powerful political rivals. A public revelation of an illegitimate son could have endangered both you and your mother. He kept his distance to protect you." Kai pressed a hand to his forehead. This revelation hollowed him out and filled him all at once. A strange, overwhelming swelling of grief, relief, confusion, and a simmering anger. "I don't understand," he whispered. "Your mother knew," Dr. Thorne continued. "She agreed to keep it secret, with one condition: when you turned 30, the trust would be released to you privately." He nodded slowly. He knew that part. He had lived that part. But then, the true weight of the story, the systemic forces that had shaped his entire life, began to unfold. She added, her voice a low, resonant hum. "What you don't know, Kai, is that the trust fund was merely a prelude." Kai's heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat. "A prelude? Anya, what else?" Anya placed a heavy, leather-bound folder on the polished mahogany table. Its embossed lettering, previously unnoticed, now seemed to glow with an ancient power. Vanguard Holdings, a titan. A name whispered with reverence in the highest echelons of global finance. Confused, a tremor in his hand, Kai opened it. Inside, documents detailed a labyrinth of minority shareholders. His eyes scanned, then froze. "Kai Vance, 12% ownership." He stared, the words blurring, then sharpening into an impossible truth. This can't be real," he finally choked out, his voice thin. "It is," Anya confirmed, her gaze unwavering. "Your father, Marcus Vance, ensured you inherited a significant portion of his empire, but it was placed under protective trusteeship, a shield against those who would seek to exploit it, until you were ready. The trustees were waiting for the opportune moment, for you to claim your rightful place." Kai's mind reeled, a whirlwind of disbelief and dawning comprehension. "So, I'm a shareholder of a global corporation, a major one." "Yes," Anya said simply, a hint of pride in her tone. "A pivotal one." He leaned back, the ornate chair creaking under his weight, utterly stunned. His muscles felt like water, the grand room spinning in slow, dizzying circles. $26 million was already a seismic shift, but corporate ownership? Influence in an empire his father built, an empire that shaped industries? This was a force of nature. He suddenly remembered Sterling Thorne's sneering smirk, his dismissive laugh, the cruel way he'd declared Kai had nothing, was nothing. The irony was a bitter, almost suffocating wave. Sterling Thorne, who obsessed over power and status, had spent 2 years treating a man richer, more connected, and infinitely more powerful than himself. Like a burden, a charity case, a stain on their fabricated legacy. And the world, twisted by their narrative, had made Kai believe it. "Your father," Anya continued, her voice softening, "was not just wealthy, he was a visionary, a strategist. He wanted you to forge your own path, to build your own resilience, before revealing the full truth of your inheritance. Tragically, he passed before he could introduce you to his world, to the legacy he built for you." A sharp, familiar knife of grief twisted in Kai's chest. "Why didn't I know sooner?" "He intended to tell you at 30, Anya explained. "Your mother, too, but she was taken too soon." A dull ache spread through him deeper than before. He pictured his mother's radiant smile, the comforting warmth of her hugs, the profound sorrow in her eyes sometimes, when she thought he wasn't looking. She had carried this monumental secret alone. She had guarded his father's memory, his father's protective love, his father's unwavering belief in Kai, hidden, yet ever present. Tears pricked the corners of his eyes. I wish she could see me now. He whispered, his voice raw. Enya's expression softened, a rare, tender moment. She would be immensely proud of the man you've become, Kai. He nodded, wiping his eyes, unashamed. Not now, not after everything. But then another feeling surged, sharper, colder. A steel-edged resolve. Purpose. He straightened, his spine rigid. Why are you telling me this now? Because, she said, her eyes piercing, it changes everything. You are not powerless in this systemic assault. You are not alone. You have leverage, influence, assets the Thorn dynasty cannot even begin to comprehend, let alone touch. Kai breathed deeply, the air suddenly charged. They can't know. Not yet, she agreed, a strategic glint in her eyes. But you need to understand your true position. You're not just defending yourself. You are a force with more legal ammunition, more moral authority than they ever imagined. He looked down at the folders, the documents, the legacy he never knew he had. And for the first time since the nightmare with the Thorn dynasty began, he felt the ground beneath him solidify. No, not just solid, fortified. When he finally left the grand chambers, sunlight streamed across the ancient pavement. The breeze cool, crisp, carrying the scent of change. The world looked different, not because it had changed, but because he had. He walked slower than usual, absorbing every revelation. Every step carried the weight of truth, but also a strange, exhilarating buoyancy. A new version of himself, resilient and resolute, began to form in the space where uncertainty once lived. But as he approached his modest apartment complex, another thought surfaced, one that tightened his jaw. Amara. She knew nothing of his inheritance, nothing of his father's empire, nothing of his newfound power. But her parents, if they ever discovered the truth, they would come for him with a vengeance far beyond mere humiliation. This was no longer just about survival. It was about justice. He entered the apartment quietly. Amara was standing in the living room, by the window, as if she had been waiting for him her entire life. Her eyes were swollen, her hands clutched tightly. Kai, she whispered, her voice fragile. Where were you? He stared at her, not with cruelty, but with a profound clarity, a quiet truth. I was learning who I am, he said. She blinked, confusion clouding her gaze. What do you mean? He stepped closer. For the first time, he didn't feel small in his own home. He didn't feel uncertain or apologetic. He felt grounded, steady, whole. You'll know soon enough, he said softly, his voice resonating with newfound authority. Everyone will. Amara's breath hitched, fear flickering in her eyes. What's happening? She whispered. Kai looked past her, toward the window where morning sunlight touched the floor and lawn. Golden streaks, everything, he said, and with that single word, he knew the war the Thorn dynasty had started. A war of injustice and oppression would end very differently than they ever expected. The next few days unfolded with a sharp, focused intensity. Kai had never known himself capable of such resolve. It felt as though a veil had been torn away, revealing not just the truth about his father, Marcus Vance, but the truth about himself. He wasn't the passive, quiet man the Thorn dynasty had tried to mold into a shadow. He wasn't the trembling husband begging for acknowledgement. He was the son of Marcus Vance, heir to a legacy built on brilliance, resilience, and power. A man with resources and influence the Thorn dynasty couldn't begin to comprehend. And with that realization came a fire under his ribs, a righteous inferno that pushed him to action. Kai spent the next morning at the bank, securing every document tied to his ancestral legacy. Kai transferred sensitive files into a fortified digital vault. He demanded new account protections, new legal layers, new encryption. The bankers, once dismissive, now met his gaze with an unfamiliar deference, a subtle acknowledgement of the weight of his name, of his people's enduring spirit. It felt strange, unsettling, yet undeniably right. Later, he met with Dr. Alara Vance and her team, two sharp financial strategists and Detective Jackson. Jackson possessed the quiet intensity of a man who had witnessed humanity's darkest corners and found himself beyond surprise. Jackson spread his files across the polished table. We've been tracking the Sterling dynasty's movements. They're in a panic. Kai arched an eyebrow. Already? Jackson allowed himself a grim smirk. Word travels fast when powerful people are publicly humiliated before their own guests. Victor Sterling's pride shattered the night you walked into their gilded mansion. With that legal notice, good. Kai thought, let it burn. Jackson continued, since then, Victor has contacted multiple lawyers, financial consultants, and a private investigator. Kai stiffened. A private investigator? For what? We believe he's trying to dig into your background. Dr. Vance said, her expression hardening. He's looking for leverage. For dirt, anything he can twist. He won't find anything, Kai replied, his voice steady. Jackson nodded. He won't. We've already secured your records. But it shows how desperate he is. Desperate. The word tasted like the first sip of victory. Dr. Vance leaned forward. Kai, it's time we shift from defense to offense. He lifted his eyes to hers, unwavering. What exactly do you have in mind? We expose their misconduct before they can spin it. Financial manipulation, illegal attempts to access your accounts, theft of your ancestral deed, coercion. We'll build a case so solid, they'll have no room to breathe. He considered it for a long moment, then a slow, deliberate nod. Do it. But Dr. Vance held up a hand. Before we proceed, there's something else you need to know. Jackson opened another folder. A thicker one. Inside were printed photos and transcriptions. Kai leaned in, his brow furrowing. These, Jackson said, are the Sterling family's communications over the past month. Text messages, emails, voice memos. Kai scanned the pages, his stomach twisting as he read lines dripping with contempt, with casual cruelty. Serafina, he's dead weight. Isabella deserves better. Victor, once we have control of the assets, he'll be out of the picture entirely. Serafina, I'll convince Isabella he's emotionally unstable. She'll side with us. Victor, get him to sign the papers without reading them. He's naive enough. Kai closed his eyes. He inhaled slowly, forcing the white-hot anger to settle into something colder, sharper. He turned the page and froze. A transcript. Isabella's voice. Isabella, I don't know. He's been distant. He doesn't trust me anymore. Serafina, good. That means he'll break sooner. Victor, just push him. He'll fold. He always does. Isabella, I'll try. Kai felt something rupture inside him, something so deep it almost stole his breath. Not the betrayal itself, but the tone in her voice, soft, compliant, yielding, not malicious, not cruel, but willing to bend for them, willing to be their pawn, willing to break him if it earned their approval. Dr. Vance spoke softly, as if careful not to step on a wound that was still bleeding. You needed to hear it, realistically, not through their excuses. Kai nodded. He said nothing, but his hands clenched tightly, fingertips white. He breathed slowly, until the pain sharpened into an unyielding resolve. Continue, he said. Jackson slid one final page toward him. This is the most important piece. Kai looked down. A legal draft document, never filed, but clearly prepared. Petition for financial guardianship over spouse due to mental instability. His name was printed at the top. Beneath it, filed on behalf of Isabella Sterling. He felt the edges of the world blur again. But this time, not from shock, from fury. Cold, searing, righteous fury. He sat perfectly still for several seconds. Then he looked up, and his voice was quiet, deadly steady. They were going to strip everything from me. Yes, Dr. Vance said. And they felt confident they could. Because they thought I was no one. Because I was quiet. Because I trusted them. He corrected sharply. The room went silent. Then Kai inhaled deeply. We moved forward. Whatever you need. Whatever it takes. I'm ready. Dr. Vance nodded. Then we begin. That afternoon, Kai returned home to find Isabella sitting on the couch. Her knees pulled to her chest. She looked exhausted, eyes swollen from crying. She sprang up when he entered. Kai, she whispered, voice cracking. Where have you been? I've been calling. He set his keys down calmly. I turned my phone off. She blinked, surprised. Why? Because I needed space, he said. She approached him hesitantly. Are we okay? He studied her face. He saw fear, regret, but also something else. Something he hadn't truly seen before: obedience. She wasn't fighting for their marriage. She was fighting for her parents' plan not to fall apart. "Isabella," he said quietly, "did you know about the guardianship petition?" Her face drained of color. "What?" "The document your parents drafted, with your name on it." Her hands began to shake. I didn't sign anything." "I swear, but you knew," he said. "You didn't object." She swallowed hard. "I didn't think they'd actually file it. I thought it was just talk that you participated in," he said softly. She flinched as though struck. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I didn't want to lose them. And you were willing to sacrifice me, to let them erase everything I stood for." The air crackled, thick with unspoken pain. Serafina's hand flew to her mouth, a choked sob escaping. "I'm so sorry, Kai. I'm so sorry. I was terrified. Kai, they poisoned my mind, whispered lies about you, about your instability, your recklessness. They said I had to choose their power or your impossible dream. And you chose." Kai's voice was a low, dangerous rumble. "To believe them." She collapsed, a heap of despair at his feet, clutching at his hands. "Please, Kai, don't leave me. I'll fight them now, I swear. I'll prove my loyalty. I'll do anything." He looked down, a profound weariness settling over him. This woman, once his beacon, now a broken reflection of the system that sought to crush him, begging for a chance she had already squandered. He felt the cold grip of sorrow, the heavy weight of what was lost, but the fierce, defiant love that had once burned for her had been extinguished, replaced by a chilling clarity. He gently, deliberately, removed his hands from her grasp. "Serafina," he whispered, his voice laced with an ancient pain. "True love doesn't demand you betray your own soul, or another's." She sobbed harder, a desperate plea tearing from her throat. But Kai stepped back, his posture straightening, a new resolve hardening his gaze. "I am done begging for my dignity," he declared, his voice resonating with newfound power. "I am done being controlled by fear." Through her tears, she whispered, What are you going to do?" Kai stood tall, a warrior emerging from the ashes. "I am going to expose the truth," he stated, his eyes burning with an unshakable conviction. And in that moment, for the first time in a long, long time, Kai felt truly free. The Blackwoods wanted a fight. Now they were going to get a revolution. For days after Kai's confrontation with Serafina, their once vibrant home hung suspended in a suffocating quiet. Not a peaceful silence, but a heavy, oppressive stillness, the kind that pressed down on your chest, making your own heartbeat echo like a drum against the walls of your skull. Serafina moved like a phantom, her presence a whisper of regret. She cried in the bedroom, a constant, mournful hum, staring at the worn floorboards when Kai passed, a desperate attempt to rebuild something she had already helped burn to the ground. But Kai had crossed a threshold. Something fundamental within him had shifted, permanently. He wasn't cruel, he wasn't vengeful. He was awake. One evening, he sat alone at the old wooden table in their small community office, poring over stacks of documents, a highlighter his only companion, when he heard Serafina's soft, hesitant footsteps behind him. "Kai, can we talk?" she whispered, her voice fragile. He didn't look up. "We've talked enough." She swallowed hard, twisting her fingers, a nervous habit. "Not like this, Kai, please. I need you to truly hear me." He slowly lifted his gaze, meeting hers. Her eyes were red, swollen, desperate, a mirror of her crumbling world. "Fine," he said, his voice flat. "Talk." Her voice trembled, a barely audible confession. I didn't know my parents were going to file those injunctions against you, Kai. They manipulated me too. They've always controlled my life, every decision." I thought her words broke, dissolving into a fresh wave of tears. "I thought I had to choose them, or I'd lose everything." Kai's voice was quiet, but it cut through the air like a razor. "Then you should have chosen what was right." She collapsed into the chair across from him, tears dripping onto her clasped hands, forming dark, spreading stains. "I know I was wrong. I'm so sorry. I'll do anything to fix this." Kai's gaze was unyielding. "Sorry doesn't change the fact that you helped them corner me, helped them try to silence my voice." Her breath hitched. "I didn't mean to, but you did," Kai stated, his voice devoid of emotion. Serafina let out a broken sob, a sound of utter defeat. "Kai, I love you." He stared at her. This woman he had once believed would be his partner in changing the world. Now, he wasn't sure she even understood the meaning of the word. He wasn't sure she recognized the difference between love and dependency, between loyalty and fear. But before he could respond, her phone buzzed, vibrating insistently on the table between them. The name flashing across the screen ignited a cold fury in him, more potent than he expected. Victor, her ex-boyfriend. Kai's jaw tightened. "You still talk to him?" Serafina froze, her face draining of all color. "It's not, he's just a friend, Kai." Kai reached across the table, his hand closing around the phone before she could react. Her panic was immediate, palpable. "Kai, wait, don't." But he had already opened the message. From Victor. "Did you tell him yet? We need him out before the asset transfer. Call me." The small office seemed to tilt. Kai felt something inside him go utterly silent. Cold, absolute. Silence. He stood slowly, deliberately. Serafina scrambled to her feet, grabbing his arm. Her voice a frantic plea. "It's not what you think. Kai, please, let me explain." He shook her off, gently but firmly. "You were working with him." No. "It's not. Victor was helping me think. He said my parents were pushing too fast." "Helping," Kai repeated, his voice flat as steel, devoid of any warmth. "Or using you?" She shook her head wildly, tears streaming. "He said he had connections, that he could help me if things with you and my parents fell apart. But I didn't mean to, Kai. I swear I wasn't trying to hurt you. You were coordinating with your ex-boyfriend." Kai said softly, his voice a chilling whisper, "Behind my back, while your parents plotted to dismantle my life's work. And your biggest concern was losing your comfort, your privilege." She collapsed back into the chair, sobbing so hard she couldn't speak, her body racked with despair. But Kai no longer felt compelled to comfort her. Her tears had lost their power over him. An hour later, Kai sat in Aunt Martha's small, cluttered office. Victor's damning message screenshot pulled up on his phone. Aunt Martha read it once, her wise eyes narrowing, then exhaled sharply. "This complicates things. Kai, Victor is a known associate of Mr. Blackwood's business rivals. He has deep connections in property disputes and asset acquisition. If he was involved, they weren't just planning to take everything," Kai said quietly, his voice steely. "Not just planning," Aunt Martha corrected, her voice firm. "They were executing." Jaden entered, a thick folder clutched in his hand. "We pulled Victor's phone records. He's been meeting with Mr. Blackwood on and off for months, secretly. They've been strategizing together." Kai's jaw clenched, a muscle twitching. "And Serafina?" Jaden hesitated, his gaze softening with pity. "She didn't meet with them directly, Kai, but she provided them with information they needed." The final nail. Aunt Martha pushed the folder toward him, its weight heavy with betrayal. "You needed confirmation," she said, her voice gentle. "Now you have it." Kai stared at the documents, the betrayal spreading through him not like fire, but like ice. Cold, clear, irreversible. He looked up, his voice steady, unwavering. "What's our next move, Aunt Martha?" Aunt Martha met his gaze, her eyes burning with the same fierce determination. "We strike back, Kai. Publicly, legally, and we don't stop until justice is served." Jax's grin, a glint of steel. "Absolutely. We have it all." Vivian's own voice, admitting she orchestrated Serafina's betrayal, the coercion, the psychological warfare. "It's all there." Kellen's breath hitched, a slow, deliberate intake. Document every whisper, every lie, every calculated cruelty. Enya's head was already bowed, fingers flying across her keyboard, a silent promise of retribution. The apartment, once a sanctuary, felt like a tomb. Serafina sat huddled on the cold floor, a ghost of her former self. The door creaked open, and she flinched, her eyes hollow and haunted, finding Kellen. "Kellen," her voice was a raw whisper. "Please, talk to me." He closed the door, the sound echoing the finality in his heart. He didn't move closer. "There's nothing left to say." She lunged, grasping his arm, her grip desperate. "Don't do this, don't leave me." His gaze fell to her trembling hand, then to her face, A mask of tragic, desperate fear, not love. Serafina, his voice was a low rumble. You didn't betray me out of malice. You betrayed me because you never learned to stand on your own. She shook her head violently, tears streaming. I can change. I can be better. No, he said, his voice laced with a profound weariness. You could have been better yesterday, or months ago, or any moment I needed you to truly see me. Her face crumpled, a broken mosaic. I didn't know what Senator Thorne was doing. Julian tricked me, I swear. Kellen shook his head. A silent, resolute no more excuses. She froze, the absolute finality in his tone shattering something within her. Kellen, please, don't end this. He held her gaze, his heart a raw, aching wound, yet his resolve was unyielding. This ended, he whispered, the moment you chose them. Her hands fell, limp, to her sides. She sobbed, a quiet, helpless sound. But he didn't reach for her. He walked past her, into the bedroom, pulling a worn leather suitcase from the closet. Her voice was a fragile thread. You're leaving, tonight. Yes, she covered her mouth, trembling. Where will you go? He zipped the suitcase slowly, deliberately. Somewhere you and Senator Thorne can't reach me. Her cries escalated, almost feral. No, please. Kellen, don't go. He paused at the threshold, turning for one last look at the woman who had once held his world. You didn't lose me to another person, he said, his voice a quiet, devastating truth. You lost me to the truth. Then, he walked out. The door clicked shut, a soft thud that reverberated like a gunshot in the silence. This was the end of a marriage, yes, but the war against Senator Thorne and his empire? It had only just begun. Kellen didn't look back. The city night air, cool and sharp, hit him like a jolt of pure clarity. His suitcase wheels rattled a rhythmic, grounding beat on the pavement. Somewhere, high above, Serafina's broken cries still echoed in the chambers of his memory. But he forced himself forward. For too long, he had lived for the comfort of others. Tonight, for the first time in years, he chose himself. He found refuge in a modest, anonymous hotel on the city's outskirts. The room was small, clean, a neutral space untouched by the Thorns' suffocating influence, their manipulations, their insidious secrets. He set his suitcase down, walked to the window, and gazed at the sprawling, darkened skyline. The distance felt right. He wasn't running, he was repositioning. The next morning, the room felt brighter, lighter, a new dawn. Kellen sat at the small desk, nursing a cup of black coffee when his phone buzzed. Kellen, we need to move up our timeline. Enya's voice, devoid of pleasantries, cut through the quiet. Senator Thorne is accelerating his efforts. Kellen stiffened, the coffee cup freezing halfway to his lips. What happened? He's requested an emergency hearing with the judge regarding the guardianship petition. Kellen's jaw clenched. On what grounds? Fabricated grounds. Enya's voice was sharp, laced with contempt. He's claiming you have episodes of emotional instability and financial irresponsibility, citing conversations that never existed. Kellen inhaled slowly, a cold dread coiling in his gut. Does Serafina back these claims? A heavy pause stretched across the line. Not yet, but Senator Thorne is pressing her hard. Kellen closed his eyes, a dull, throbbing ache behind his ribs. What do you need me to do? Meet me at the sanctuary in an hour, Anya commanded. There's something you must see. When Kellen arrived, Anya and Jax were waiting. Their faces grim, etched with a quiet fury. Jax paced, a caged predator, barely containing his rage. What's going on? Kellen demanded, his voice tight. Jax held out a tablet. Watch. The video was grainy, security footage from a dimly lit, opulent bar. Kellen frowned, leaning closer. Then his eyes widened, locking onto the screen. Senator Thorne and Julian sat in a secluded booth, drinks in hand. Julian leaned in, speaking animatedly, a viper whispering poison. Senator Thorne nodded, his face a mask of self-righteous indignation. Then, Julian slid a folder across the table. Jax paused the video. We enhanced the audio. He pressed play. Senator Thorne's voice, cold and guttural, cut through the static. If she signs those papers, Kellen won't have a leg to stand on. We'll own everything he thinks he has. Julian's smirk was chilling, She already agreed to my suggestion. She's confused. She'll do whatever you push her to do next. Senator Thorne let out a cold, triumphant laugh. Good. She was always easy to steer. Just like her mother. Cullen felt his stomach twist violently, a wave of nausea washing over him. His breathing grew shallow, but he forced himself to remain still, his gaze riveted. The video continued. Julian, and once he's out of the picture, Serafina gets the house. The accounts, the stability. You and Vivian get control. Senator Thorne, perfect. The boy never belonged in our family anyway. Jack stopped the playback. A heavy, suffocating silence descended, thick with disgust, with righteous rage, with a chilling vindication. Cullen swallowed hard, his voice a raw rasp. They were planning to destroy me completely. Anya nodded, her expression hard as tempered steel. And now, Cullen, we have proof. Cullen stared at the screen, the betrayal burning like acid in his chest, but beneath it, a new fire ignited, cold, clear, and utterly unyielding. Kai had lived for too long in the shadow of their gaslighting, a constant whisper of doubt telling him he was overreacting, that he misunderstood. He'd hoped their contempt wasn't as profound as he feared, but the truth, when it finally surfaced, was far more chilling. They didn't just dislike him. They saw him as utterly disposable, a pawn to be moved and discarded. And Serafina, his wife, had been the unwitting bridge they used to invade his life. To dismantle it from within, Adriana cleared her throat, a sharp, professional sound cutting through the quiet. This footage, Adriana stated, her voice a steel blade, is not just enough to dismantle their entire legal argument. It will shatter their carefully constructed reputations. Jax, Kai's tech expert, allowed himself a grim, knowing smirk. When this goes public, Victor Thornwood will implode. Adriana finished. Kai nodded slowly, a heavy weight settling in his chest. There was no satisfaction, no triumph, only a stark, painful clarity. What's next? He asked, his voice low. We play our strongest card, Adriana declared. We confront them with everything we have, but strategically. Kai frowned, a flicker of confusion. What do you mean? He pressed. We've arranged a formal mediation, she explained. A meeting between both parties. Typically, it's used to save marriages. Her gaze met his, unwavering. But in this case, she continued, it will serve a far more potent purpose. What purpose? Kai asked, a tremor of anticipation. To expose the truth, Adriana said, her voice dropping to a whisper, in person, in front of their lawyers, with no escape. Kai hesitated. Serafina will be there, won't she? A painful, familiar pressure tightened in his chest, a ghost of the past. He didn't know if he was ready to face her, not yet. Adriana softened her tone, sensing his turmoil. Kai, this isn't about hurting her. It's about freeing you, and giving her the truth she's been too afraid, or too unwilling, to face. He nodded slowly, the weight of her words sinking in. Adriana continued, meet us at the Grand Arbitration Chamber tomorrow at 6 p.m. We're something that makes you feel strong. Kai exhaled, a long, slow breath. I understand. The next day arrived cloaked in a tense stillness, as if the city itself held its breath, sensing the monumental shift about to occur. Something monumental was coming. Kai dressed with meticulous care, dark slacks, a crisp white shirt, a fitted charcoal jacket, simple, clean or strong, not wealthy, not flashy, not trying to impress, just the unvarnished truth of who he was. At 5:55 p.m., he stood outside the imposing entrance of the Grand Arbitration Chamber. The doors were tall, heavy, ancient wood and polished brass. They reminded him of the Thornwood family mansion, but here, power flowed not from inherited lineage or arrogant wealth, but from the unyielding force of truth. Adriana and Jax joined him, their faces resolute. Ready? She asked. Kai nodded, a silent affirmation. Together, they pushed through the heavy doors, entering a private, opulent conference room. Victor Thornwood, Eleanor and Serafina sat at a long, polished mahogany table. 3 Thornwood lawyers flanked them, their expressions razor-sharp, hungry for blood, like vultures circling. But the moment Kai walked in, a palpable shift rippled through the room. Victor stiffened, a vein throbbing in his temple. Eleanor's lips tightened into a thin, white line, and Serafina, Her breath caught audibly, a small, broken sound. She looked fragile, trembling, grief and confusion etched across her pale face. But Kai, seeing her, did not let himself weaken, not now. He took his seat directly across from them, calm, steady, an immovable force. The mediator began with polite formalities, but Kai barely registered the words. His gaze remained fixed on the Thornwoods, the architects of his pain, the people who had tried to crush everything he had ever built, everything he was. Victor scoffed, his voice dripping with disdain. Are we really doing this? What more could you possibly want? Kai didn't answer. He simply gave a subtle nod to Jax. Jax tapped a button on his sleek laptop. Instantly, the grainy bar footage flared onto the massive projection screen. Victor Thornwood's voice, unmistakable, thundered across the silent room. If she signs those papers, Kai won't have a leg to stand on. Eleanor went visibly pale, her hand flying to her mouth. The Thornwood lawyers froze, their predatory smiles vanishing. But Serafina's face drained of all color, her eyes widening in dawning horror as she turned, agonizingly slowly, toward her father. The video continued, a chilling echo. Serafina will do whatever you push her to do, Victor. Then, Victor's own chilling reply, good. She was always easy to steer, just like her mother. Eleanor gasped, as if physically struck. A choked Victor, you. Victor Thornwood surged from his chair, his face contorted in rage. This is illegal. This is manipulated. It's time-stamped, Jax said coldly, his voice devoid of emotion. And confirmed by the bar owner. Serafina's gaze snapped to Kai, broken, pleading, utterly devastated. Kai, I didn't know any of this. I believed him. Her voice was a raw, desperate whisper. Kai finally spoke, his voice quiet, but devastatingly clear, cutting through the chaos. You didn't ask, Serafina. Serafina sobbed openly, a sound of pure anguish. She collapsed back into her chair, shoulders shaking. Eleanor stared at the polished floor, a deep, burning shame creeping across her face. And Victor Thornwood, powerful, arrogant Victor, suddenly looked very small, his bluster deflating. Kai stood, his presence filling the room, radiating an unshakable resolve. This ends now. His voice was a quiet thunder, every threat, every lie, every manipulation. He turned his gaze, sharp as a laser, to Victor. You wanted control of my life. You wanted to break me, but you never checked the foundation of the man you were trying to destroy. Victor glared, sputtering. You're nothing but. Kai raised a hand, a small, almost imperceptible gesture, but it silenced the room. You thought I had nothing, he said softly, his voice carrying immense weight. But I have something you'll never understand. Victor sneered. And what's that? Kai leaned forward slightly, his eyes locking onto Victor's. Integrity, Victor faltered, his sneer dissolving. And now, Kai added, his voice gaining a steely edge, I also have something else. Jack stepped forward, placing a thick, sealed envelope onto the table with a decisive thud. Leverage. The Thornwood lawyers exchanged panicked, frantic whispers. Victor swallowed hard, his face ashen. You can't win. Kai's voice softened, yet grew sharper than any blade. I'm not trying to win, Victor. I'm trying to reclaim my life. He turned, a man reborn, and walked toward the door. Behind him, chaos erupted, voices shouting, lawyers scrambling, the carefully constructed facade of the Thornwoods crumbling into dust. Serafina was begging him to stop, her pleas echoing, but Kai didn't turn around. He didn't need to. For the first time in his life, the truth was walking with him, not against him. And that, he knew, was more powerful than any fortune, any inherited power, any lie they had ever wielded. The grand arbitration chamber meeting didn't end. It exploded as Kai walked out. The Thornwoods' voices tore through the thick walls of the conference room, panicked, furious, desperate. For so long, they had held the upper hand, speaking with the smug assurance of those who believed themselves untouchable. Now, their voices cracked, sharp with raw fear. And Kai felt nothing for them. No guilt, no hesitation, no lingering anger, only the quiet, steady certainty that he had finally done what he needed to do, what his mother had always taught him, to stand for himself, to fight for his dignity, without ever becoming like them. Outside, the evening light spilled like liquid gold over the steps of the grand arbitration chamber. The twilight sky over Viridian City bled a deep, defiant orange. Kai paused at the hotel room threshold, inhaling the crisp, cool air. It tasted different tonight. Freedom always did. Ava, his steadfast counsel, joined him. A worn legal binder clutched to her chest. Her stern expression softened, a rare, gentle smile gracing her lips. "You handled that with such grace, Kai," she murmured. He offered a faint, weary smile. A ghost of his former self. "Grace?" I felt hollowed out. "Precisely," Ava affirmed, her eyes gleaming with conviction. "That's exactly what today was." A turning point. Jax, their tech wizard, approached, phone still buzzing with updates. Victor Thornwood's meltdown is already a viral sensation among his own legal sharks. Believe me, his gilded reputation is in absolute shreds. Kai didn't respond. His gaze lost somewhere between the crushing weight of relief and a lingering ache. He wasn't naive. He knew this wasn't over. Men like Thornwood didn't surrender. They merely regrouped. But the foundation of their empire had cracked. For now, that was enough. He thanked them both, his voice a low rumble of gratitude, and headed back to his room. That night, for the first time in months, he slept without the terror of waking. No haunting nightmares, no insidious voices whispering doubts, just a profound, echoing silence and, for once, peace. But dawn brought the next wave. At 7 a.m., a hesitant knock echoed through his suite. He opened it cautiously. Serafina stood there, a ghost of the woman he had married. Her hair was disheveled, eyes bloodshot. Her expensive clothes wrinkled, as if she hadn't slept in days. She clutched a designer purse to her chest like a fragile shield. "Kai," she whispered, her voice a raw, trembling plea. "Please, please talk to me." He stepped aside silently. Not an invitation, but a strategic retreat from a public scene. She entered slowly, almost collapsing onto the nearest armchair, a figure of utter defeat. He offered no water, no comfort. "What do you want, Serafina?" he asked, his voice a quiet, steel-edged question. Her lips quivered. "I saw the video. I heard everything." Tears streamed down her face, carving paths through the dust of her despair. "My father, I didn't know he said those things. About me, about you, about my mother." Kai leaned against the polished desk, arms crossed, a stoic sentinel. "Your parents don't see people, Serafina. They see pawns in their game of power." She cried harder, burying her face in her hands, a broken sound. "I was so stupid. I let them use me. I thought I was being a good daughter." "You were being obedient," he corrected gently, his words a soft, devastating blow. "Not good." She looked up, her eyes wide with fresh agony. Are you really done with me?" He inhaled slowly, the weight of the question demanding more than a sharp retort. It demanded the unvarnished truth. "Serafina," he said quietly, his gaze unwavering, "I loved you deeply, and I think a part of me always will." Her eyes softened, a flicker of desperate hope igniting within them. But he continued before she could speak, his voice a gentle, final pronouncement. "But love cannot survive where there is no trust." She shook her head, sobbing uncontrollably. "I didn't cheat on you. I didn't sleep with Marcus. I didn't. This isn't about sex, Serafina." Kai interrupted, his voice firm. "This is about loyalty. You stood with your parents, not with your husband." Her breath hitched painfully. "I was scared. I was so scared. I was scared too." He countered, his voice laced with the echoes of his own battle. "But I didn't betray you." She covered her face again, a raw, messy grief consuming her. Kai almost reached for her, his hand hovering, a silent battle waged within him. But he stopped. Mercy wasn't the same as reunion. After minutes of quiet, agonizing sobs, she finally whispered, "What happens now?" Kai sighed, the sound heavy with finality. "Now, we finalize the divorce." She gasped, a choked sound of protest. "No, please, Kai, no. It's the only way," he said firmly. Not cruelly, but with an unyielding honesty. She threw herself forward, grabbing his sleeve, her fingers desperate. "Let me fix this. Let me prove you wrong." He gently pried her fingers off, his touch resolute. You can't undo what's already been done. Her chest heaved with broken sobs. I didn't want any of this, but you helped build it. He said softly, his words a quiet, undeniable truth. The truth hit her as hard as any physical blow. She collapsed back into the chair, utterly defeated. He waited until her breathing steadied, a silent vigil. Serafina, he said gently, his voice carrying a profound sadness, you deserve to heal. Away from them, away from me. But I can't be the man who waits for you to choose him second. Her face crumpled, but she nodded. A silent acknowledgement. She understood. Some endings hurt because they're heavy, others hurt because they're right. Serafina stood slowly, wiping her tear-streaked face. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice barely audible. For everything I know, he said. His voice a quiet acceptance. She hesitated, waiting for something, some signal that he might take her back, a flicker of hope. But none came. She walked to the door, opened it, and paused one last time, her voice a fragile whisper. I hope someday you find someone who truly sees you. He nodded, a silent promise, you too. Then she left. Kai stood there long after the door clicked shut, the room feeling emptier, yet undeniably lighter. Grief swelled within him, but it was a grief without regret. He had done what needed to be done, and now it was time to finish what the Thornwoods started. Over the next week, the fallout from the Thornwood scandal spread like wildfire across Viridian City. Victor Thornwood was under intense investigation, not only for orchestrating a fraudulent petition, but also for his deep ties to Marcus, who had a documented history of asset coercion schemes. Jax's relentless investigators unearthed a labyrinthine web of illicit financial irregularities. Within Victor's most prestigious companies, authorities were notified, the media caught wind, and rumors swirled like a tempest. By the end of the week, Victor's once unassailable law firm dropped him. His business partners, once loyal, suspended him, and Maeve Thornwood, usually a paragon of icy composure, was seen fleeing a high society luncheon in tears, the whispers of scandal following her like a shadow through the opulent dining hall. But the true catastrophe, the seismic shift, came when Serafina's full statement went public. She told the entire, unvarnished story, her parents' insidious manipulation, the calculated lies, the relentless coercion, the damning video evidence, the profound betrayal. She cleared Kai's name completely, unequivocally. It didn't excuse her past involvement, but it utterly shattered the Thornwood family's ability to weaponize her, Victor, in a desperate, futile attempt to retaliate, leaked false accusations. Kai, swift and decisive, filed a defamation suit. Within hours, the Thornwood empire, built on generations of deceit, cracked and crumbled under the weight of its own rotting foundation. 2 weeks after Kai left the apartment, the world shifted. The digital missive landed like a thunderclap in Kai's inbox, an official invitation from the Viridian Legacy trustees. His father's company, once a distant shadow, now sought to formally welcome him, to discuss the 12% stake that was rightfully his. He sat in the penthouse suite, the city lights a glittering tapestry outside, the words on the screen burning into his vision. This wasn't just an ending, it was a genesis. Something far grander than the pain, deeper than the betrayal, bigger than the Thorn dynasty, perhaps even bigger than Kai himself. Javier called that evening, his voice a steady anchor. How do you feel, my friend? Kai gazed out at the sprawling metropolis, like a man who finally stopped letting others write his story. So what now? Javier pressed gently. Kai took a slow, deliberate breath. Now, he declared, his voice resonating with newfound power. Now the true ascent begins. In the reflection of the glass, he saw a man he barely recognized, stronger, steadier, unbroken. A man no one would ever underestimate again. The weeks that followed unfolded in a strange, potent blend of chaos and clarity. Kai finalized the divorce petition. With Aisha's unwavering support, he signed the last of the paperwork in her sleek, modern office, the city skyline stretching behind her. The moment his name streaked across the final document, a tremor passed through him. Equal parts grief, profound relief, and an undeniable release. It was not the idyllic tapestry he once envisioned for his marriage, but the stark, honest canvas they had both, in their own ways, painted towards. Serena didn't contest the divorce. She didn't fight. She simply signed. When Kai walked out of the grand courthouse afterward, she stood on the steps, the sky above beginning to clear, her arms wrapped around herself. Her face looked smaller, more delicate than he remembered, like someone peeling away a lifetime of layers, only to find nothing familiar underneath. She stepped towards him, a ghost of her former self. "It's done." He nodded. She swallowed hard. "I'm moving in with a friend, not my parents." Her voice cracked, a fragile whisper. "I don't want to be anywhere near them." He studied her, quiet, fragile, trying to stand upright after the storm she had helped create. There was no triumph in seeing her like this, no vindication. Only the hollow echo of what might have been, a silent elegy for a love twisted by fear. "May you find the path back to your own light, Serena," he said gently. For the briefest moment, she reached toward him, a small, instinctive gesture, her hand rising, longing for a touch that no longer belonged to her. But she stopped halfway, fingers trembling in the cool air. "Goodbye, Kai," she whispered. He nodded once, "Goodbye," and with that, the last fragile thread binding their fates snapped, clean and irreversible as a winter's dawn. Finally, irrevocably. Meanwhile, the news about Victor Thorne's legal troubles continued to spread like wildfire. His assets were frozen pending investigation. Business partners severed ties. State officials launched a full audit into his financial records. The Thorne empire, a colossus built on deceit, began to crumble, not from external assault, but from the rot within, just as Javier had foreseen. Eleanor Thorne tried to maintain appearances for a while, attending exclusive charity galas and board meetings, but without Victor's corrupting influence, her invitations dwindled to nothing. Rumors swirled of how she enabled her husband's manipulations, how she participated in the coerced guardianship plan, how she had encouraged her own daughter to betray her marriage. Influence collapses quickly when its foundation is built on ego rather than integrity. Even Damien Thorne disappeared from the public eye, allegedly fleeing the state after authorities questioned him about financial misconduct and evidence of collusion with Victor. Javier forwarded Kai an article about it with a single, potent line, "One serpent dethroned." Kai didn't reply, but he smiled for the first time in days. As for Serena, she kept her distance, honoring his request for space. Weeks later, one final text arrived. "I'm in therapy. I'm trying to heal. Thank you for telling me the truth, even when it hurt." He read it once, then set his phone down softly. He wished her well, silently, without needing to answer. Some stories find their closure not in grand finals, but in the quiet turning of a page, a silent understanding that some journeys are meant to end without an audience. But while the Thorne family unraveled, Kai found himself in a slow, deliberate process of rebuilding, this time with intention. He signed up for a small workspace in an innovative tech hub downtown, needing somewhere to think beyond the confines of the penthouse. The air hummed with the electric pulse of innovation, the scent of fresh coffee mingling with the intoxicating aroma of nascent dreams. Surrounded by people designing startups, pitching ideas, and chasing their own visions. For the first time in years, something sparked within him. Curiosity, purpose. One morning, he sat with Aisha, reviewing next steps in the lawsuit against Victor Thorne, when she asked something unexpected. "What do you want to do with the Viridian legacy inheritance?" Kai, he paused mid-sentence. He hadn't truly thought about it. The $26 million felt abstract, distant, like a number on paper rather than a tool he could wield. And the 12% stake in his father's company was even more surreal. "I don't know yet," he admitted. "I always saw myself as a cog, not a creator, a follower, not a force." "You don't need to move mountains, Kai," she said, her eyes steady. "You just need to move with truth." He sat back, letting her words settle deep within him. Something true. His mother's voice echoed softly in his memory, a guiding star. "Remember, my son, your power is not for destruction, but for creation, for lifting up, not tearing down." He spent days pondering that wisdom. Then, slowly, the shape of an idea began to form, a quiet, resolute vision, a life unburdened by fear, unbound by limitations, free from the thorn shadow looming over him. A legacy forged in his own truth. He approached a small, ethical consulting firm to help him develop a business proposal. He scheduled meetings with financial mentors. He read extensively, long nights spent with articles about ethics in business, philanthropic structures, and the true Viridian legacy. The sheer scale of it was daunting, a symphony of possibilities and responsibilities that threatened to drown him. But he would not drown, he would rise. But it also felt like destiny. On a crisp morning, Kellen entered the towering glass edifice, the heart of the Thorn legacy. The elevator ascended, a silent, gleaming ascent, carrying him higher and higher until the city below became a sprawling tapestry. His heart thrummed, not with fear, but with a fierce, quiet resolve. When the doors parted, a woman in a sharp navy suit met him. "Mr. Thorn," she said, her voice warm, "welcome. We've been expecting you." Kellen inhaled the scent of polished wood and old money. Stepping into the grand boardroom, it was everything he'd imagined, sleek, expansive, a panoramic vista of the city skyline. But what truly seized him was the monumental portrait on the far wall. His father, Marcus Thorn, the same strong jawline, the piercing eyes, even the subtle curve of a knowing smile. A profound warmth bloomed in Kellen's chest, grief, pride, longing, and a sense of belonging, all interwoven. "Before we begin," a board member stated, her voice gentle, "we want to thank you for coming. Your father always intended for you to take a seat at this table." Kellen blinked, a sudden blur in his vision. "He did." "Yes," she affirmed. "He left notes, letters. He wanted you to forge your own path, but he wanted you to know you were always meant to be part of this family." Kellen's throat tightened. "I never got to speak to him." "You have time to speak to his work," another board member offered, "and to shape it." The weight of that responsibility settled upon him, not as a burden, but as a grounding force, a call to purpose. They offered mentorship, training, guidance, a clear pathway into leadership, not because of his name, but because of his unwavering integrity and the indomitable strength he had demonstrated through every trial he had survived. Kellen left the meeting, his mind alight, but for once, in the most exhilarating way possible. He stood outside the building, the cool wind a balm against his skin, and breathed deeply. This was no longer about escaping the past. It was about becoming someone new, someone whole, someone worthy of a legacy inherited not by chance, but by character. That night, an unexpected call shattered the quiet. An unfamiliar number. He hesitated, then answered. A weak, trembling voice whispered through the speaker, "Kellen." "It's Victor Sterling." Kellen froze, utterly still, listening. Victor coughed, a ragged sound, older than Kellen had ever heard him. I need to speak to you. Please." Kellen offered no response. Victor inhaled shakily. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I need to say something before everything falls apart." Kellen exhaled slowly. "Where are you?" he asked. Victor told him. A forgotten, once exclusive club on the city's forgotten edge. Kellen clicked off the lamp beside his bed, pulled on his jacket, and walked out into the night. He didn't go because Victor deserved compassion. He went because Kellen deserved closure. And he would claim it, on his own terms. The club Victor had chosen, the Sovereign, sat at the city's forgotten edge, its once grand facade now crumbling, lit by a flickering, tired neon sign that buzzed like a dying insect. It wasn't the kind of place Kellen expected to find his former father-in-law. Victor Sterling had always preferred gilded ballrooms, hushed private dining rooms, an ambience dripping with power, not chipped marble and the stale scent of forgotten opulence. This alone told Kellen something profound had shifted. As he stepped inside, the air hung heavy with the ghosts of old money and faded glory. The bell above the door jingled softly, a mournful chime, catching Victor's attention. The older man sat hunched in a booth near the back, staring out a grimy window rather than at the dusty menu. His shoulders slumped forward, as if bearing the crushing weight of a life finally catching up to him. He didn't look powerful. He didn't look fearsome. He looked broken, old. Kellen approached slowly. Victor didn't turn until the shadow of Kellen's presence fell across the table. For a long moment, Victor didn't speak. didn't sneer, didn't puff his chest. He simply stared. And to Kellen's shock, his eyes looked sunken, hollowed out by defeat. "Thank you for coming," Victor rasped, his voice a dry whisper. Kellen slid into the seat across from him. "You said you needed to talk." Victor nodded, staring down at his shaking hands. "Before everything collapses, before I lose everything, I need to tell you the truth." Kellen didn't respond. He wasn't here to prompt or to comfort. He was here to listen, and to decide what closure truly meant to him. Victor took a long, rattling breath. "My entire life," he said slowly, "I built everything I had on fear. Fear of not being enough, fear of losing control, fear of anyone questioning me." He paused, jaw tightening. "Your father, Marcus Thorne, he and I were rivals in everything. Business, influence, networking. He was respected, admired, trusted. People listened to him willingly. And me, I demanded respect. I took it. I forced it." Kellen stiffened, his father's name still striking a deep chord. Victor swallowed hard. "When I found out you were dating my daughter, I hated you instantly." "Because I wasn't wealthy enough?" Kellen asked quietly. Victor shook his head. "Because you reminded me of him." Those words landed like a blow Kellen hadn't anticipated. "You had the same quiet confidence, the same patience, the same way of looking at people, like you were assessing them without judgment." Victor laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "I resented you because you were the kind of man I spent decades trying to convince myself didn't matter." Kellen leaned back in the booth. Stunned into silence, Victor continued. "I told myself you were weak, that you were insignificant, that your gentleness meant inferiority. But the truth is," his voice cracked slightly, "your kindness made me feel small." Kellen didn't know whether to feel pity or disgust. "So you tried to control me," Kellen stated. "Yes," Victor admitted, his voice barely audible. "Control. You diminish, you break. You do anything to ensure my daughter didn't choose a man who made me look like less." Kai's voice, though steady, held a tremor of the past. "Why manipulate Amara? Why push her to betray me?" Senator Thorne's eyes, once cold steel, now glistened with a raw, unexpected vulnerability. "Because she was all I ever had. My entire identity was built on being the patriarch, the man who provided. I needed her to need me, and I feared that if she saw you, Kai, for who you truly were, double quotes dot better, stronger, she'd stop leaning on me." Kai looked away, a bitter taste coating his tongue. "A ghost of old wounds. Your fear," Kai stated, his voice low, "cost us everything." "I know," Thorne whispered, his voice a rasp, "and I can't undo it." A heavy silence descended, thick with unspoken years. The hushed clinking of glasses from across the deserted club seemed to amplify the raw tension. A server approached, then quickly retreated, sensing the charged air. Thorne reached into his tailored coat. He pulled out a thick, folded envelope. His hand, once firm, trembled visibly as he placed it on the polished mahogany. "This is everything." He tapped the incriminating paper. "The proof of what I did, the documents my team and I prepared, the bribes, the lies, the surveillance, everything I can give you to close the case against me." Kai stared at the envelope, a Pandora's box of betrayal, but didn't touch it. "Why now?" Kai asked, his voice barely a whisper, echoing the weight of the moment. "Why give this to me?" Thorne's voice dropped, hollow. "Because Amara hasn't spoken to me since the mediation. Because Eleanor moved out. Because I lost my seat on the Viridian Group board. My companies. My reputation." He gave a hollow, broken laugh. "Now, all I have left is the truth. And the truth is, I wronged you deeply. You didn't deserve any of it." Kai's jaw tightened, a muscle twitching. "You nearly ruined my life." "I know," Thorne rasped, his eyes fixed on some distant point, "and I have to live with that." Kai studied him, truly studied the man across the table. The towering arrogance was gone. The chilling superiority vanished. Even the ingrained hatred seemed to have drained out, leaving only a man stripped bare by consequences he once believed himself immune to. "Do you expect forgiveness?" Kai asked, his gaze unwavering. Thorne's head snapped up, a flicker of his old fire. "No." Instantly. "I don't expect it. I don't deserve it." "Then what do you want from me?" Kai pressed. Thorn looked down at his gnarled, once powerful hands. "I want you to walk away from this with your integrity intact. The part of you I tried so hard to break. I want you to be the man my daughter should have been proud to marry." Kai's throat tightened, a knot of unexpected emotion. Not because Thorn deserved an ounce of sympathy, but because the raw truth in his words resonated with something deeper within Kai. Something Kai had fought for, clawed for, since the very beginning. "I already am," Kai said softly, his voice a quiet declaration. "I never stopped being that man." Thorn closed his eyes, a flicker of profound pain crossing his ravaged face. Then, "I'm grateful for that. More than you know." He stood slowly, each movement an effort, slipping his coat on. He looked at Kai, one last, lingering gaze. "You may not believe this," he whispered, his voice barely audible, "but you were the best thing that ever happened to my Amara, and I ruined it, because I didn't want to admit my own failures." Kai offered no response, his silence a powerful statement. Thorn placed a trembling hand on the edge of the plush booth, steadying himself. "I'm leaving town," he said, his gaze distant. "I don't know if I'll ever come back, but before I go, I needed to face the one person I couldn't control. The one person who showed me exactly who I was." Kai held his gaze. The burning anger finally cooled. The bitter resentment settled into a quiet understanding. Nothing was forgiven, but the war between them had finally died. "Goodbye, Senator Thorn." Thorn nodded slowly, a ghost of his former self. "Goodbye, Kai." He walked out of the club, a figure diminished, trembling, smaller than the Titan Kai had met years ago. The heavy oak door swung shut with a soft thud, the sound lingering long after he disappeared into the unforgiving city night. When Kai finally stepped outside, the night air felt different, cleaner, lighter, as if something toxic, a deep-seated poison, had finally been expelled from his very soul. He drove back toward the city, the silence a balm, letting the profound closure settle deep into his bones. By the time he reached his temporary hotel room, he already knew he wouldn't stay there much longer. A new life, a life of his own making, was forming, and he was finally ready to claim it. The next morning, he packed his single suitcase, not with the frantic urgency of running, but with the calm, resolute intention of moving forward. He scrolled through listings of houses in a different city, a fresh start, a new place, a clean slate earned through fire. One particular listing caught his eye, a house with a wide, welcoming porch, ancient, sheltering trees, and sunlight pouring through every window. He felt something warm bloom inside him. Hope. He closed the browser, leaning back, a quiet smile touching his lips. He wasn't starting over because he'd lost everything. He was starting over because he had finally, truly gained himself, and that, he knew, was worth more than the $26 million, more than the mighty Viridian Group, more than any fleeting revenge. It was worth everything. Kai left the hotel 2 days later, suitcase in hand, his heart steady in a way it hadn't been in years. Not steady from certainty, no, but steady from profound decision. His past was behind him now, the Thorn dynasty, the insidious manipulation, the public humiliation, the long, agonizing unraveling of his marriage. All of it had ended in a way he never thought possible, not with bitter revenge, but with undeniable truth. And truth, he discovered, was the sharpest, most liberating blade of all. He drove for hours through winding country roads toward the neighboring city, a place quieter, greener, far enough from the long, grasping shadow of the Thorn dynasty that their influence couldn't reach him. The sky above was a canvas of pale blue, streaked with silver clouds drifting lazily overhead. He watched them, a sense of peace settling, letting the stillness settle deep inside him. He wasn't escaping, he was clearing space for the life he actually deserved. By late afternoon, he reached the city outskirts. Quaint shops lined the sun-dappled streets. People chatted outside bustling cafes, and the gentle hum of normal, vibrant life greeted him like a warm, comforting blanket. He exhaled, feeling his shoulders, for the first time in years, truly loosen. The community center Kairos had chosen stood at the heart of the historic district. 2 stories of weathered brick, a vibrant mural of ancestral faces adorning its side, and ancient oak trees standing guard like silent sentinels. It bore no resemblance to Senator Thornton's cold, marble estate. This place pulsed with warmth, resilience, and soul. It felt like home before he even stepped inside. He signed the documents, the keys heavy in hands that trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the profound weight of reclaimed legacy. After years of systemic injustice, he stood in the empty main hall. Afternoon sunlight streamed across the worn wooden floor, leaving golden patches that danced gently with the breeze through open windows. The building creaked softly, as if waking from a long, forced slumber. He let out a breath. He was alone, but not isolated. He was untethered from the past, but not lost. He closed his eyes and listened to the silence. It was the first silence in years. That didn't suffocate him. It comforted him, a quiet promise. For the next week, Kairos built a future, quietly, methodically. He unpacked, arranged furniture, brought in plants, and placed photographs of his trailblazing ancestors on the mantel. He cooked meals in a kitchen filled with sunlight. He sat on the porch swing in the evenings, listening to the hum of a reawakening community. He learned how profound solitude could feel when it wasn't imposed by systemic cruelty. One morning, while assembling a bookshelf for the new library, his phone buzzed, a number he didn't recognize. He debated ignoring it, but something nudged him. He answered, "Hello?" A bright, warm voice responded, "Hi, this is Dr. Chen from the Lumina Foundation. I'm reaching out because your vision for community empowerment landed on my desk." He blinked. "Oh, yes, I sent a proposal last week." Dr. Chen laughed softly. "Proposal? More like a fully thought-out blueprint for a movement." "I'm deeply impressed." Kairos's cheeks warmed. "I'm still new to all of this." "Well, you articulated it beautifully," she said. "We'd love to discuss partnering with you." Kairos's chest filled with something he hadn't felt in a long time. A powerful sense of purpose. "I'd like that," he said. They scheduled a meeting for the next day. After the call ended, Kairos stood there for a moment, the bookshelf forgotten. Life was moving forward, not dragging him, not pulling him, but inviting him to lead. The next afternoon, he met Dr. Chen at a bustling community cafe near the city center. She was in her early 30s, with soft curls pulled into a loose bun, and warm brown eyes that sparkled when she smiled. She reached out to shake his hand. "You must be Kairos," she said brightly. "It's great to finally put a face to the revolution." He chuckled. "I'm still surprised you responded so quickly." "Are you kidding?" she said. "Your idea is exactly what the Foundation has been searching for. Support programs for young adults navigating systemic barriers. It's brilliant." A gentle heat spread through his chest. "My mother always believed in empowering people who were systematically denied support. I wanted to honor that." Dr. Chen smiled softly. "My own journey was shaped by overcoming similar systemic hurdles. Your proposal hit home for me." The conversation flowed effortlessly after that. They talked about mentorship structures, funding pathways, and emotional support frameworks. Kairos found himself opening up in ways he hadn't expected, with ease, without fear, without needing to shrink or apologize for who he was. When their meeting ended, Dr. Chen stood and gathered her laptop bag. "I'm excited about this." "Kairos," she said sincerely, "you're different from the people we usually work with." He raised an eyebrow. "Different how?" She smiled, grounded, gentle, purposeful. "Leaders like you don't come around often. You are the change." Her words resonated deeply. Maybe this city wasn't just a place to heal. Maybe it was a place to ignite a movement. Weeks passed. Kairos attended meetings, spoke on panels, and began channeling his reclaimed resources to build programs that truly mattered. The Lumina Foundation approved his mentorship proposal. Teenagers and young adults, once marginalized, began signing up. He hired counselors, mentors, educators. For the first time, the shadow of his family's past, a legacy of systemic power, didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a bridge to a brighter future. One afternoon, after a day of planning sessions, Kairos found himself sitting on the community center's porch. With a cup of tea, the sun dipped behind the trees, bathing everything in gold. Then, footsteps approached. He looked up, Senator Thornton stood at the edge of the walkway. Except he wasn't the man Kairos remembered. He wore wrinkled clothes, his hair unkempt, exhaustion clung to him like a second skin. A small, worn suitcase rested beside him. Kairos stood slowly. "What are you doing here, Senator?" Thornton swallowed, his voice unsteady. "I know I shouldn't have come. I had to see what you've built." Kairos didn't move closer. "Why?" Thornton looked down, shame flickering across his face. "Because you became everything I fought to suppress, everything I failed to be." Kairos's jaw tightened. "What do you want, Senator?" The older man lifted his eyes, glassy with tears he fought to hide. A chance to apologize, not to be forgiven, just to apologize. Face to face, Kairos exhaled slowly and crossed his arms. "Say what you need to say." Thornton's throat worked. "I lost everything. My empire crumbled. My family fractured. My reputation is gone. And I earned all of it." Kairos didn't respond. Thornton took a deep breath. "But I want you to know something before I disappear." He stepped closer, voice raw. "You're a better man than I ever allowed myself to believe. I hated you because you reminded me of everything I wasn't. And I hurt you because I couldn't stand to face my own failures." He paused, his voice shaking. "And yet, you never sank to my level. You rose. You never faltered. You never stooped to their level, never returned cruelty for cruelty. You clung to your truth, your inherent dignity. Even when they tried to strip it from you, piece by agonizing piece, you became everything we tried to dismantle." A heavy silence descended. Marcus's spirit stirred, not with pity, nor even forgiveness, but with a profound, weary understanding. Senator Thorne recoiled, a shadow of his former power. "That's all I came to say." Thorne's voice was a whisper. Marcus paused, then his voice, clear and resonant, cut through the air. "Senator Thorne." The older man froze, every muscle tense. Marcus stepped forward, closing the distance, his gaze unwavering, piercing Thorne's hollow eyes. "I don't forgive you," he stated, his voice a steel-edged calm. "Not yet, perhaps never, but I refuse to carry the weight of your injustice any longer. I refuse to let your hatred define me." Thorne's breath hitched, a visible tremor. Marcus continued, his gaze sweeping over the silent square. "Now, you must live with what you've done." Thorne nodded slowly, "A broken man. And you, Marcus, you must continue to heal this world." Thorne turned, a figure diminished, and walked away, his steps faltering, yet somehow lighter, unburdened by the fight he'd lost. Marcus watched until the senator disappeared into the twilight, a relic of a fading era. Then Marcus turned to face the crowd, the first stars beginning to pierce the deepening sky above. He felt no personal triumph, no vengeful satisfaction, no lingering bitterness, only a profound, collective peace. The understanding that the shadows of the past, the chains of injustice, no longer held them captive. They had survived betrayal. They had found their collective truth. They had reclaimed their dignity, their future, and now they were ready to build it together. Marcus's journey, and the journey of countless others, reminds us true strength isn't always found in the loudest voice, and dignity doesn't require the approval of your oppressors. Sometimes, the most revolutionary act is to rise above those who refuse to see your worth, to refuse to let their blindness diminish your light. Healing isn't instant. It's a slow, deliberate, collective choice to rise above systemic betrayal, to rebuild with unwavering intention, to forge a future free from the shadows of injustice. Marcus didn't win because he fought harder in the arena. He won because he chose integrity over vengeance, truth over fear, and self-respect over the approval of those who sought to dehumanize him. This is a lesson, a blueprint for change each of us can carry. Your value, our collective value, isn't determined by those who try to break us, but by how we choose to rise together. If this story ignited a spark within you, share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell us what part of this fight for justice resonated most deeply with your spirit. And if you crave more powerful narratives of resilience, of triumph, don't forget to subscribe. Join our movement for a more just and equitable world.